All right, everybody, welcome to another Perceptive podcast developer interview here on the Game Wisdom channel. I am Josh Beiser, and we have another great discussion lined up. For tonight, we're going to be talking to two developers of Impeller Studios. They did the Kickstarter originally for the game Starfighter Inc. It has now turned into In the Black. And they're here to talk about the design of the game, as well as some of the challenges and considerations that went into it. So please welcome to the cast, Jack and Edmar. How are you guys doing?
Hi.
Hey,
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah.
It's great to have you guys on. How is everything going? I know you guys are located in Georgia and New York. I am in New Jersey. We are all still pleasantly or presently stuck inside at the moment.
It's actually pretty natural for us because the whole team is distributed. So as you mentioned, Jackson in Georgia. I'm from New York, but I'm currently in Vermont right now, pretty close to Montreal. But members of our team are scattered all across the United States and in Europe. So this actually has not been any kind of transition for us in terms of development, moving to remotely. So it's nothing's changed at all from that perspective on the development side of things.
And nobody has the coronavirus so far in our team, so we're all happy about that.
Yes.
Yeah. Good to hear. Like all the guests I've had on, like everyone in the game industry, we prepared for this. Like this is how we work. We don't need to leave the house. We can do everything remotely.
Literally my whole life.
But it is a pleasure to have you on. I've been talking with Edmar for the last few weeks about getting things set up, and it's great. We have plenty of time now, and for any developers or if you're a teacher who works in teaching game design, we're always looking for new guests for these live recorded casts. So definitely feel free to email me, bug me, DM me, whatever you want. Send off a smoke signal and see if I can get a hold of you there. But we certainly have a lot to discuss tonight. So to begin with, since this is both of your first times on for these casts, could you talk a little bit about your respective backgrounds when it comes to the game industry?
Jack.
Yeah. Yes. Let's see, what are we, 2020? I've now been in the game industry in a AAA capacity or an independent capacity now for 25 years. I began my career at Activision, where I was lucky enough to work on the MechWarrior 2 franchise. I was a producer and director on MechWarrior 2, MechWarrior 2 Ghostbear's Legacy, and MechWarrior 2 Mercenaries. I really loved making those games, and I learned a lot about how the industry works. After that, I directed a game for them called Heavy Gear 2 that was our follow-up giant robot game based on Canadian product RPG called Heavy Gear, and I had my own company for a while in Southern California called Check 6 Studios, and we worked on a Spyro game there for Universal Studios. After that, I joined Crytek as a lead designer, and I was the lead designer of the original Far Cry and the lead designer of the original Crysis. I finished there, and I got hired at Midway Games as a creative director, and I was working on a console version of a build-your-own superhero game that we called Hero, and unfortunately Midway crashed and burned when we were just about alpha. So at that point I decided to open my own studio again in Savannah, because I'm from Savannah, Georgia originally, and I love it here. And I got recruited at the Savannah College of Art and Design, where I've been a professor of game design for the last 10 years and been working on our game In the Black, which used to be called Starfighter Inc., for about off and on for about 6 years. We've been kicking it around, and we're getting close to getting a closed beta going out pretty soon.
Nice.
Damn, I never get tired of hearing your background. It's so freaking impressive. It's crazy. I was a producer over at THQ. I worked on a couple of military shooters, first-person multiplayer games. One was called Frontlines, Fuel of War. The next one was called Homefront.
Oh, yes.
And then went on to handle business development for companies specializing in the online service sector for gaming. So verified anti-cheat, which I still do. That's a server-side anti-cheat that's used by DICE and Ubi and others. So I help us work with different studios and publishers. And I also handled biz dev for an online hosting company, which provides the back end to services like Discord, Rocket League, and others. And I still do that work today, but for different companies. That company I used to work for was recently acquired by Ubisoft. I founded Impeller Studios about 7 years ago, probably. We started very early on. Just the idea was to come up with a really cool, fun space combat sim at that time, believe it or not, which is crazy to think about it right now, today. At that time, though, there was not even one space combat game available. None, not on any console, any platforms, nothing. Shortly after we started working, Star Citizen was announced, and then the rest is history, and kind of blew up. Elite Dangerous, and of course, Eve is really big.
Eve Valkyrie.
But, Eve Valkyrie. Yep. So it's been a very fun ride. So we have a distributed team. We're an independent studio. And we basically have been working on this project in the black as a passion project. And shortly after I met Jack, I was introduced by chance to David Westman, who was the mission designer on all the X-Wing games.
Nice.
And it was just then to find out that Dave knew Jack. They had worked together before, and kind of the rest is history. I always, when I tell people about working with these guys, it's very much in my eyes that it's like a chocolate peanut butter kind of thing. They just they go so well together. They're very different, but also go so well together. So we kind of narrowed down on our focus, which is our kind of unique selling point versus the other titles, which are also awesome in the genre. And we're really doing something different in the sense we're using realism as the core design pillar of the game. So we're using Newtonian physics, component damage on the ships, realistic environment. So the lighting and the art is all based on realism. So it's a very unique kind of spin. And if you're a fan of The Expanse, we've had a lot of people tell us that the gameplay looks and feels very similar to what the Expanse space battles are. So that's kind of where we're at today.
Fantastic. And it's you guys of course mentioned Star Citizen, and you said that Impeller was founded about 7 years ago, right? So it'd be like around 2013. So it was like just as the Kickstarter bubble began to blow up. And looking at the page, you launched the Kickstarter for originally Starfire. So that was, I can't see it. Oh wait, here it is. Like, did you start that in 2017 for the Kickstarter?
Yeah,
that was the second one.
Okay.
Yeah, so we had two Kickstarters. We did one about a year and a half before the most recent ones. We did two altogether. The first one was generally just a high level pitch for our idea. We hadn't really started much work on a vertical slice yet. We did some prototyping. We were on a different engine at the time. So at that point we were just pitch, and at that point actually Kickstarters. Prior to that, there were some Kickstarters that had been very successful by pitching the concept of what you were trying to make, and people just got excited about the team and the energy and would back it. We came in at that point though when that kind of luxury was no longer there, and people really wanted to see and feel the game before they backed it. We were pretty close to our goal in the Kickstarter. I think our goal was 250, and we hit over 235 or something. But with Kickstarter, it's kind of all or nothing. So we took that as a really good lesson that we need to. People really want to see what it is we're envisioning. So that's what we did. We basically took that feedback we got and just started making the game and on our own time and on our own dollars. A lot of the team is basically working on it for sweat and passion and to be part of the longer project. So we've been working on after we started working on the game, we started using the Unreal Engine, which was also very smart.
Unreal 3, first of all.
Was it Unreal 3 first?
We were Unreal 3 first, and we moved to the Stingray, then we moved to Unreal 4. So we
Right.
were
Yeah.
on three different engines.
That's true. Yeah, Stingray was an engine idea that Autodesk was working on that was a little too soon for its time, and unfortunately for them, it was when Epic really drastically changed what their licensing structure is for the Unreal Engine, and so the Stingray was kind of a victim to that. I think probably the CryEngine was probably a victim to that also.
Yeah. Yeah, we looked at the CryEngine actually. We talked to them over there because obviously I'm familiar with it. I helped design the engine and worked with a lot of my friends over there. And Epic just had a better deal. And Unreal 3 was good as a prototype tool, but I was never happy with the lighting. But when Unreal 4 came out, they fixed the lighting and the PBR materials and everything, and you could make stuff that just looked realistic. And I love realism, and that's one of my favorite things to do. So when we moved to Unreal 4, I was really happy with that platform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, every game I've done as a developer when I was at THQ and afterwards has always been on the Unreal Engine. So I've definitely always been a big fan. I think Epic, especially over the years, has gotten really good about documentation and really putting themselves out there with the game developer community. It's they've come a long way. I think when I was at THQ, there were always some challenges where the Unreal Engine at that time was really built around like Gears of War and their titles, and basically other studios could have access to the engine. It was a great engine, but it was really made for that game for the most part. I think over the years they've definitely evolved, and it's become a much bigger engine. It's used in movies and a lot of stuff outside of games completely, architecture, a lot of enterprise stuff. But just it's hard not to use Unreal in this day and age. I think it's definitely a case for Unity in some situations, but for especially what we're doing, Unreal is the best fit, especially for the realism component, like Jack mentioned.
Yeah, and especially for the independent side, I mean, we're seeing so many indie devs these days make use of this engine, and like you guys were saying, like coming from a AAA background, like 15, 20 years ago, that was pretty much an engine that was, AAA studio only. Like, you couldn't really buy it or get into it otherwise. And
a lot of people used the Source engine back then, which was the Half-Life 2 engine, and I think it originated at id. But certainly it was not set up for people who were not really kick-ass programmers to work on, and Unreal just makes it easy with their blueprint system and everything like that, just for anybody to jump in and start making great content.
Mm-hmm. We've got a few questions from chat. Oscar wanted to ask, for you, Jack, could you expand a little bit on your game dev teaching career? What it's like, the curriculum, etc.?
Sure. I didn't really know I could be a teacher when I was recruited, and I was very nervous about getting up in front of people. And we have 2.5-hour classes at SCAD, and I got into it, and it found out that programming is one thing, art is one thing, but my specialization was in game design, game direction, and production. And it really just fit hand in hand with what we were doing there, because a lot of the classes I teach are called the capstone classes. It's all the students on their senior year, they'll form into teams and they'll make games. So I'm able to teach them like the classes that I teach some of the game design classes. We have one called Core Principles of Game Design, and that's more or less a board game building class because you're teaching game mechanics, but you don't want to get into technical issues. And this is a class that is offered generally at their sophomore year after they've really cut their teeth and they're just getting into our program. And we go and we teach a lot of game history. So we teach about game designers, and we teach about game methodology like waterfall method, agile method, etc. And we actually have them build board games during the quarter, and they really dig into the mechanics, and it gives them a solid base for moving forward and creating original content. And I teach a class called Applied Game Design, is when they actually they get to pick an engine of their choice. 90% of the time it's the Unreal Engine, and they have to make an original game design and base it on something we call a Cerny method, based on some of Mark Cerny's work, where they actually build a toy first, which is a standalone avatar, before they even build the narrative or they build the backstory and things like that. They get the control working, they get a perfect moment-to-moment experience going, and then by the end of the quarter they make like a prototype level. And then my capstone classes are actually called Studio 2 and post-production. In Studio 2, they team up and they choose their team size. Sometimes it's as little as 2 people working together on a small project, up to our classes are 20 people in size. We've had teams that are 20 people in size where we actually, I teach them, I require them to do the agile method. And it works really, really good with we have a quarter system, and they basically have 10 weeks to make the game. So that's about 4 sprints and change. And they use agile, and generally I've worked on with my students. I think I'm going on like 141 projects now that
Wow.
they've done, and
Nice.
they've won multiple festivals. They like the E3 college game competition. We won that 3 years in a row, and 2 of the games came out of my classes. So they're doing something right. And a lot of my students, I'm proud to say, have gone on and gotten great jobs in the industry. Insomniac. I've got a lot of students working at Blizzard now, Bungie. They're all over, and we hear every day another one's got a killer job. So it's really a fulfilling job because I mean, a lot of people who've been in the industry for 25 years are getting a little jaded by this time, but I've always got fresh minds coming in and working on product, and they all have completely different ideas about how the game should be, what the content should be. We have the gambit from everything from absurd, abstract games to I've got some students this quarter that are making a game. They did research on Alzheimer's and dementia, and they're making a serious game based on Alzheimer's, where it's looking at somebody's life and they're looking back on their life and stuff like that. So it's just very, very fulfilling, rich job, and it's always changing, keeps you on your feet, keeps you up to date with latest stuff. So that's kind of my game design teacher story.
Yeah, very impressive. Like the whole time you were describing the course, I was just smiling. I think the check and the can see me just like smiling from ear to ear from that, because I would love to have attended that. And like we were talking about before the stream, so much about I think game design still is like that magical. We have the meme around. We just describe BioWare magic when people think about the magic of design, but it is really a lot about like the science of it, being able to understand. Like again, for you, Jack, I'm sure you've gotten ideas and concepts from kids or from the students coming in that are just completely off the wall, like kitchen sink approach kind of designs, and those I think in the end don't necessarily end up working well. And I love, as you were describing, the idea that they have to start with the proof of concept, create a mechanic, and then develop that as the moment to moment, because so much I think of what goes into a successful game is nailing that moment to moment. And like for like the audience watching, I've said this before, like I can tell these days within like the first 15 to 30 minutes of playing a game whether or not that game is going to turn out well, because if the moment to moment isn't working, there's nothing else. Like I have quit games in 10 minutes of playing because it's just not working for me. It doesn't matter if this opens up in 20 hours if I'm already getting frustrated 10 minutes in.
Yeah, I'm guilty sometimes of really sticking with a game even beyond the initial concept. Like, for instance, a lot of JRPGs like Black Dragon and even some of the Final Fantasy, they are just not fun for the first 10 or 15 hours. And then at a certain point, something clicks and they just become super addictive. And so it's like, but I'm like you too, where if I jump on a game and I'm not having fun pretty soon, I'll get bored pretty fast. And I definitely have quit out a lot of games just because there's so much content now to play.
Definitely. And again, like we could eat if we're not careful. Let's just turn into a whole teaching game design cast right now, which I definitely I would love to do it with you guys as well. Like we have so much we can talk about. It's the beauty and the horror of doing this stuff. Like for my audience watching this, like we can say, oh, it'll only be like a 30-minute chat about one specific topic on game design, and then it's an hour and a half later, and we haven't even like scratched the surface on it yet.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
I
the
mean,
game industry has just become so big. I think a few years ago it was approaching the movie industry in terms of global revenue, and now it multiplied by the multiple times bigger than the movie industry. And back then, when Jack was working on his big games, the barrier to entry to game development was pretty high. Like you had to have a lot of expensive equipment, a lot of expensive licensing. You just couldn't go in there and make a game if you had a great idea and some knowledge. You really needed to have a team behind you and a company. It's not like that anymore at all.
At least not for PC games, but for console games, it's still like that. You have to have a dev unit, and those are anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 to get it on, and you have to have it approved by Sony and or Microsoft or Nintendo. So it's still a pretty big barrier to entry to those sort of games. But
platforms,
PC games that's the verdant, rich garden of delight, right? That all, especially the way Steam and now Epic just lets you put the game up on their delivery system essentially for free. It's unbelievable that anybody can get into this business now.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's accessible, but the technology has gotten, I think, although in one sense it's easier to use, like with Unreal Engine blueprints, but the technical know-how is needed to really do something really well in the game. I think it's pretty high up there, which is why the programs that Jack and I both teach at are very popular. Jack probably gets this question all the time, because I know I do, from parents who are like, "Hey, I've got my third grader, my fourth grader really into the game or older, and what are the options for them? Is there really something there?" And so we've just been seeing a big growth in enrollment at the game programs. I'm an adjunct at Champlain College Game Studio, which is located in Burlington, in Vermont. And like Jack, we've both had to switch to remote teaching in the last several weeks. So it's been pretty enlightening experience to engage with the students right before they're about to graduate, and they're doing everything remotely. It's kind of it's tough, right? You probably have talked about this with some of these students, because they're missing that last part of school, which is kind of a rite of passage when you're graduating college. So anyways, it's kind of like the teaching experience right now is a little
I had
different.
a lot of students, they were really sad at the end of winter quarter, because they were like, I'm not going to see these people again, and they're not going to really go through a graduation or anything like that. So for myself, I'm spending a lot of extra time with them, not just the 5 hours we would have with them a week. I'm really spending all the time on them and really getting in and trying to give them a little extra bonus, since they're having to go through this. And the projects that we're working on are really coming along really great. And the students they're all showing up at the meetings. They're all working really hard from home. And it's just really impressive that the tenacity that the students have, and the desire to really put out good content.
Yep. And again, it's the beauty about this kind of industry is that everyone has their own unique story and their own, specific focuses when it comes to what they want to design. Like for the new people watching us right now, like every week I take a look at nothing but indie games once a week, from like games that are sent to me, keys I get from developers, and the spectrum is just massive. About a month ago, I saw a few games based on Indian mythology. You were describing a game about Alzheimer's a few minutes ago, a serious game about that. Like, there's never really a limit, I think, on what kind of concept or what kind of topic you want to discuss when making a game.
In fact, my other team is working on a game called Devil's Denim, and it's about Satan's pants becoming they literally he takes them off, and they come alive, and they go possess people, and they're walking through a mall, and they're eating people and throwing them out as they call them spicy meatballs that become the cannon. So you never know what they're going to come up with. Oh, it's a hilarious game, very abstract. But the game itself is just super funny.
Yeah. That's funny. I was just on itch.io checking out some of the stuff with my class earlier today, and I was pretty blown away. I hadn't been on itch in a while, but there's a lot of stuff on there.
Oh, yes. But I think as a challenge that you guys are saying is that the ability to make games has certainly become a lot easier, but the barrier of entry when it comes to making something that could be considered a success, or even just being noticed by people, has become a lot harder. And like this, something again, like I get keys from all manner of developers. I've gotten games that have been in development for 10 years. I've gotten them from like 2 to 3 months of dev time, and that spectrum is so wide. And like I said, like 15 minutes is not a long time to, judge somebody's, livelihood that they spend who knows how much money and time on. But
yeah, our game is a slow boil game. That's just like, we didn't set a time limit when we wanted to get it out. We just said we're going to make the game we're happy with.
Yeah.
And we're going on about 7 years working on this, and it's not quite done yet, but it's certainly we're able to put everything we want into the game and really examine things that if we were on a even a AAA budget, we would have had to cut that stuff a long time ago. And we're able to focus on things and make things that was on our dream list of sort of aspects that we'd like to have from our game design document.
Yeah, and it's gone to that point where like. Every Sunday I do a live show here with Sharky and Chat, and we take a look at the games that are coming out in the following week or so. And again, that spectrum of quality is astronomical. Like, it's gone to the point where I look at some games, and just by like the thumbnail alone, I know not to click on that game because I know it's not going to be worth anybody's time. And it's sad to say that, but again, there's we've always said there's only still 7 days a week. Like, there's only so many hours we can actually sit down and play these games. And even for myself, like last month, I must have played easily over 100 different indie games, and that doesn't even qualify maybe even like 10% of the games that were released that month.
Oh yeah, no, it's true. I think there's been some criticism of Steam. For basically just kind of open the gates with any kind of curation. And there's definitely something to say for that, but it also makes it much harder to discover things when you see so much, so many titles on there. And a lot of them definitely are not like the highest quality. And that's why I think, other stores coming in like Epic Store, I think hopefully will encourage the stores to be better about having nicer ways to find and discover and filter things and talk about them. I think one of the great things that I've been seeing lately in terms of discoverability is the social interaction that's happening in some games. I think that has a lot to do with how a game grows, and I think probably the best example of that is Fortnite, where you have a game that the social aspect of it is so built into the experience. And it goes beyond the core game mechanics where they're doing other stuff in the game, events, music events, and it's just such a great way to build a community, and they've just done it so well. But yeah, I'm working with a team right now, another team is helping with some biz dev stuff called 11th Hour Games, and they're doing this game called The Last Epoch, which is kind of like a Diablo game. It's an action RPG, very cool dungeon crawler. It looks amazing. You would never know that this team is basically, like us, also a passion project for them. They also did a Kickstarter. And I look at that quality, and I'm like, this looks like it could be Blizzard. So there's just a lot of passion and drive out there from people who want to make games, and it's so cool to see. And like Jack, I've also seen the same thing. People come up with these wild. I think that's one of the benefits of teaching that I never really realized when I started. That you get exposed to the ideas and just different ways of thinking about game design from a different generation, and I've taken a lot away from that I totally didn't expect. And it's really, really awesome to see. I keep thinking about that game Jack was telling me about, Satan's Denim. What is it called?
The Devil's Denim.
Devil's Denim.
Yeah.
So I gotta check that out. But yeah, so I think that's been a nice benefit of teaching, and that's also helped me with my business development work in the industry, as well as helping to manage Impeller Studios, because I think what happens sometimes with anybody's profession, right? You get stuck in your way of doing things, and that's just the way you've always done it. It's the way you've known. You're not exposed to other ideas or other directions, and I think that's just so important to your own like personal and professional growth. And that's something that for me, being able to work with multiple teams has been great, but also working with students has just been really amazing.
Yeah, and like for myself, like I was telling you guys at the start, like I've been interviewing game developers since 2012, and that's where I kind of build up my knowledge base on what it means to design games, and it really I think has improved how not only do I appreciate games, but how I analyze them as well. Because when I got into it mostly as being that hardcore gamer playing nothing but the hardest games. That's it, and through like my contacts and a lot of developers, I've been exposed to a lot more interesting designs from like open world games, RPGs, novel, adventure, and so on. And just being able to talk to these developers and get like kind of their thought process when it came to making these games really opened up my eyes. And like the weirdest thing is that when I talk about design reviewing games, it's so natural for me to talk about this stuff, but it's still hard, I think, to explain if you don't, already have, your foot somewhere, you dip your toe somewhere in that pool.
Yeah, I'm like I was asking you before the show started. I was asking if you had worked on games yourself before, and because it sounds like you'd probably be able to make a kick-ass game based on your writing and your interviews with all of the developers. So I'd be curious what kind of game you would make if you had the budget.
I've written design docs for like several dream ideas in the past. I would love to make two. Actually, one of the first ones I wrote was for essentially, this was pretty much Mario Maker before Mario Maker was even around. It was a create your own platformer, kind of like game/engine. And then, kind of like my dream idea, one of them was a horror roguelike game. Fully 3D horror, survival horror, but with like a random and procedural generation, just to like kind of keep the player guessing each time they play it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, again, I think that's always been one of the challenging aspects. I'm sure there's
Isn't that Diablo?
You should check out Last Epoch. I'll send you a couple keys.
Oh, that'll be great. I just came up with a dream. This is when you've played too many video games. I've dreamt up game ideas. I've had like dreams and nightmares of them. I dreamt up if Doom was combined with Dark Souls, like a slower pace first-person shooter, but with the slower focus of a Dark Souls game.
All bosses.
Yeah.
All bosses.
And then I woke up from that dream. I'm like, wait, this game doesn't exist. Damn.
Needs to.
Yeah. And what I was saying was like the challenge, of course, I think this is something I'm sure you guys can attest to with like teaching and working with students, is being able to get that idea out of somebody's head and put it into something that it can be used. Because I am sure every one of us here on the stream and everyone watching in chat could just sit and talk game ideas, and for like the next 2-3 months. We could just sit here and just talk them up. But being able to actually sit down and think how these mechanics work is a different story. One of my first ideas, I think this was like the first one I wrote an idea for, was like a kind of a survival, kind of like a survival-based game, but with full destructible environments. And I remember when I was writing that design doc, at one point I just spent 3 pages figuring out how the destructibility of the world would work. And that kind of level of detail, I think, it's important. I think it's one of those stepping stones into being able to take this idea and make something playable out of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough, like it sounds so negative, but ideas are actually very. That's not the hard part. Ideas are probably the easy part, right? Mm-hmm. And publishers, it's very hard to make a pitch to a publisher, or even like on our original Kickstarter campaign of an idea.
Yeah.
And be able to prove that you can do it. I think that the hard part is actually taking the idea, fully iterating on it, testing it, getting feedback on it, constantly improving it. So a lot of it is what you do with the idea, and that's why people go to school for it now, or take online classes, or just learn from other people, other mentors. But yeah, like publishers, they'll say, we don't even care about your idea. Just call us when you have something for us to look at.
They usually don't even care about your first playable. They want a finished game that's already successful.
That's true too, actually.
Yeah, it's like, is your game successful? Yeah, we'll publish you.
Yeah. Did you beat Half-Life 2 yet in sales? No. Call us back later.
Yeah, is this as good as PUBG? Oh yeah, we'll be glad to publish this for you, right? So it's like, unfortunately, it's not the way it works. It does, and that puts a chilling effect on original concept too. Yeah. We've seen that a lot ourselves, where we're more or less presenting an entirely new idea that we're a spaceship game that doesn't work like an airplane game. When we were doing research, due to George Lucas basically making Star Wars from cuts of Battle of Britain and the Dam Busters, which were 1942 bomber movies, all the X-Wings fly like airplanes. So when people fly spaceships in most games, they're basically flying airplanes. Yeah. And we started prototyping spaceship game. Like Edmar said, the full Newtonian physics. That in itself, while having I wouldn't say a completely original idea, because Star Citizen and Elite Dangerous certainly have the same sort of physics, the way the ships work. But when you go into the actual realism of it, you find there's a lot of stuff that Dave Westman, our one of our guys on the team, one of our partners, he likes to call a hand wavium, where it's like they'll just hand wave away the concept of why things work in space, and we work hard to, like, everything must have a science basis. But a lot of times when people see it, they're like, wow, that's so hard, I don't know if I want to play that, right? But then when you get into it, it's absolutely addictive.
Yeah.
It's funny, yeah. When we, I think that's a concern we all had when we started working on it. That would this be fun? Because I think that's the main concern people always have as their first thought to a Newtonian physics-based space combat game. And I remember vividly when we had our first play test of the Newtonian physics working in our ship model, and Jack said immediately, he's like, "Guys, I've done this a bunch of times. I know when something works. This works." And you just could feel right away that it was fun. And even if all the pretty stuff wasn't there yet, I think just Jack has a really good feel for when something does work from a gameplay perspective, and when the player is having a good experience.
Yeah. And it was new. It did not feel like anything else, and that scares off a lot of publishers.
Yeah.
Because they say they want original, but really what they want is a first-person shooter or a third-person action game that is in their wheelhouse, that is just basically chock full of wow moments, because then they're like, oh yeah, I get this. It's, because they understand it. And unfortunately, a lot of people in the industry, especially the people that are making the decisions, they're not really gamers. They're more like business people, and they have an army of, like, minions that are their gamers that'll tell them whether something's fun or not. And a lot of those people are Nintendo players, and our game is not made for Nintendo players. Our game is made for PC and console player, hardcore console players. So it just it's hard for some people to get into, but for the people that get into it, and we've been testing on this game for pretty in depth for about a year. People really like it when they get into it. And there is a skill set that you gain to play the game, and that was something we were looking for.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, there are Jack's point is totally true. Where there's a there's kind of a pulling towards stuff which has popular mass appeal, and when you veer into like a niche thing, I think that could be a little scary, obviously, because that's an unknown area. But some of the best games are niche games that grow very, very large. Our game is very similar in some ways to probably the World of Tanks, World of Warships kind of gameplay, where you have the component
War
damage, multiple War Thunder, multiplayer focused. and of which Jack is actually very good at. But those games, even though they're niche-y, they're actually very large. But Eve Online is probably a pretty niche game too, right? But that's huge, and people who play Eve Online play that game for years.
Yeah,
it has huge retention.
Kerbal Space Program.
Oh yeah,
Kerbal.
I mean, that is a game that actually you have to watch 3 hours of tutorial to get 15 minutes of gameplay.
It's true.
But it's absolutely fantastic once you get into it and when you check it out. Same as like Space Engineers. I would even say, MOBAs, they started as a big niche game, when Dota first came out and the games like that, and it, eventually led to League of Legends, and now that's a common game. But when it first came out, that was a real-time strategy game that was just basically a real-time tactical game. It wasn't really real strategy, and it started with a passionate fan base, and now it's grown into a multi-billion-dollar industry. So you never know where it's going to go. It's funny the way it works.
Oh yes, and going back to what you were saying a few minutes ago regarding having that niche versus that universal appeal. It's something that I've certainly have seen. It's something that we've talked about a lot on some of these casts. That there's that very fine line I think a lot of these games walk in terms of how targeted their fan base is and how open that design is for somebody to come in and enjoy it. And I think this is another one of those very tough aspects. I think this is probably something very hard probably to teach as well. That just because you have this amazing focused niche idea doesn't necessarily mean that much if you can't get people to actually get in and enjoy it. And
I mean that's called accessibility, right?
Yes.
So we had an interesting meeting with Amazon.
I hate that word.
Accessibility.
Yeah, I know that's what you want all the time, and you're right for wanting it. But for me, it's definitely almost poison to me to hear that word.
You want people to enjoy what you're making, right? So I think that you do have to be careful. You don't want to what we're going for is not an arcade type of game.
Yeah,
there's definitely something to say for Eve Valkyrie and the funness. We're going for something which is much different, more kind of hardcore experience, and they're both great in their own ways.
Yeah.
Right. But accessibility, even for a hardcore game, is pretty important.
It is.
Because the people who could enjoy your game, you'd be missing out on some of those people who would have a fun time with this niche game if they don't have the right experience in just learning how to do some basic things in the game. What do we call it? So we call it like onboarding.
Yes.
And that's something I was mentioning a minute ago. So we met with Amazon several months ago, and they had mentioned that was really important to them. Amazon is doing some really interesting things in the tech space for gaming, and for them, they also want to make sure games are very accessible. And I think most people recognize that, but it's not an easy thing to do. It's actually it takes a lot of work, because what happens, especially when you have a development team like ours, we work so well together. We know each other so well, but we're so used to what we're doing.
Yeah.
That we forget that not everybody knows everything that what we're doing or how to play what we're making. So we have to kind of rethink and relearn things. And some of the feedback we've gotten from some partners has just been fantastically valuable in terms of how to get a player into the experience. I look at, like you mentioned, Half-Life before. Half-Life, I think, is a great example of a game that just the onboarding experience is so nice. It's part of the game, actually.
Yeah.
That was groundbreaking.
Yeah,
They did that.
It's so cool. And then I think games that can do that well. I think I'm teaching my 6-year-old how to play Minecraft, and like Kerbal. I was also I haven't played Minecraft in a long time, and I forgot that game is not very straightforward. To learn how to do everything in the game. That's if you look at YouTube, look at all the videos on just how to do everything in that game. And so there's something for games which are require some depth and learning, but you got to find that middle ground, especially when you're starting out and you don't have an audience yet, and how to make that game accessible.
For the record, I even though I don't like the concept of accessibility, I know that Edmar is absolutely right when he's making me do games and design the game so it is accessible, because you definitely want people to play the game. And if you don't do it, it doesn't matter how good your game is. If they can't get in there and they can't start liking it pretty soon, it's just going to be you that plays it. And the way Edmar was mentioning it, you become an expert user pretty much after a week of working on the game, and you're absolutely tainted as to be able to see if it's fun or not for normal people.
Yeah.
And it's a real danger.
Oh,
Did
yes.
did you have that experience on MechWarrior 2?
Oh yeah. We were working on that. A lot of times I got pulled into a VP's office, and they just did not understand why, for instance, there would be a reload on missiles. Right? They just didn't get that. Right? And they didn't get why the mechs would have a heat sink on there if it stopped the mech from working. They just want it to be an arcade game. Right, but the deeper a game is, the more fulfilling experience. For me, the deeper a game is, the more fulfilling an experience it is, and I think it's important to do that. But the balance is truly. This is why I value my relationship with Edmar, because he's got a keen eye for what makes those games work, and I think we really work well together. I mean, because our other partner, David Westman, he's even more hardcore than I am as far as the game is concerned. So I actually have to balance him when it comes to gameplay, because he's like, okay, it should absolutely be realistic. And then if you made a game that was realistic, it is just not playable by normal humans.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like the three of us together, along with our amazing team, we feel like we're hitting that secret sauce of. It's a deep game, but it also is fun to play.
I'm curious though. So, when I tell people about the games you've worked on, Jack, and I mentioned, Crysis and Far Cry and MechWarrior 2, I run into a lot of people, maybe because it's mostly game developers, so maybe they have a little bit more knowledge of gaming than most gamers. But MechWarrior 2 seems to be like what excites, so a lot of people like that, and that's a niche game, right? And Crysis though. Like everybody knows Crysis, and they're relaunching it now, right? So
that's what I hear.
But MechWarrior 2, like Crysis, is not a niche game, right?
No, it's not a niche game. It is definitely it's a shooter, which is the most common game out there. Where MechWarrior 2 was basically a giant robot sim, and there's still not a lot of giant robot sims out there. But it just hit so hard when it came out there. When we were doing it for Activision, I mean, literally Activision was on its last legs when I started there. They had like 2 or 3 other games in production. One was Return to Zork, and one was a game called Paparazzi. Literally, you can look these games up. And MechWarrior 2 was just, it's based on the BattleTech license. It itself is a super hardcore tabletop strategy, miniature strategy game, and converting that to a first-person, essentially sim shooter, that was a huge niche game. But when it came out, it just sold. I mean, it was one of the first games that just came out, other than like Doom and a few games like that just sold millions and millions of copies. I mean, we just we couldn't keep it on the shelf when it came out. So, some things just take off, and some things they just fall flat. It's just it's like we were talking about, game design is like alchemy, right? You're like changing lead into gold, and the formula, you don't really know what it is while you're working on it, but you're putting a little bit of ammonium sulfite here, heat it up a little bit here, stir in some Eye of Newt and some lizard tail, and eventually it comes out and it's pretty amazing. So I've worked on games that have been super successful, and frankly, I've worked on games that have flopped in the past too. We worked on a Spyro game, and Spyro was hugely successful, but we got it after Insomniac got it at my company, and we put this game out, and it just did not do as well. I mean, it sold well, but it got bad. It's the worst rated Spyro game of all of them, because it wasn't Insomniac doing it, and they had, even though we made it just like another Spyro game, it for some reason it just didn't take off. It just didn't have that secret sauce that Insomniac puts into it. So it's you never really know when it's going to take off and go crazy. or it's going to be mediocre, or it's just not going to work. I mean, it's like it's like capture lightning in a bottle.
Yep.
Most of the time the bottle's going to shatter, and you're not going to have the lightning. But every now and then and I've been lucky enough to have worked on 3 games that have kind of taken off, and I could not tell you today what the secret sauce really is in all of them. We were just, we wrote a design document, we made the game. When I was working on Far Cry, our director and owner of the company of Crytek, Chevat Yurley, his whole directive on Far Cry is make the opposite of every other shooter out there. That was his directive to us. So we're like, okay, what are the opposite of every other shooter out there? So of course there was Half-Life and there was Doom, and they're all corridor based. They all take place in post-apocalyptic mining, underground secret weapons bases essentially, and you're walking around corners and you're seeing monsters. So of course our game is set in Tahiti, and and it was open world. So it's exactly, we basically took the opposite, and that was successful. So you never know what the trick is going to be, and where it's going to be, where the magic is going to be in there when you're making it. It's an interesting and challenging, because a lot of times I'm finding myself laying awake at night in bed trying to figure out mechanics and trying to figure out game designs, and you just can't think of something. You just, oh man, what does this thing need to make it work? I mean, what's missing in there? And you can play 1,000 other games and you can see what everybody else is doing, and you don't really want to, you don't want to really pull a Fortnite and just like pull their whole game mechanic and throw it in there. You want to kind of evolve the game mechanic, and it's super challenging to get right. And but when you get it right, it's like the most fun part to me. Of course, I love the success that comes with making critical and financially successful games. Just reading the forums of people playing it and them getting excited about the game, it'll have me in tears, when I'm sitting there reading what they're talking about it. So that, to me, that is one of the most enriching parts of putting product out.
I totally agree, 100%. It is. I think that's one of the best things about working in games, is that oftentimes most people in their jobs, they're kind of doing the same thing over and over again, and it's not really like an end to what they're doing. But when you're working on a game, there's definitely a beginning and end to it, and being able to have something at the end where you could like share with more people outside the people you're working with, I think is amazing. And then if you're lucky to like Jack to work on games like he has, you'll see it on TV and magazines and commercials, and that's a pretty amazing experience. I remember when I was at THQ, which our studio, Chaos Studios, was based in New York City. One of the most amazing moments after that pretty grueling development cycle on Homefront was walking down the street from the studio and going to Times Square and seeing basically, our game on the side of a building, and these crazy lights all over it. It just it's a great feeling to kind of, you feel proud. It's like, it's like you're a baby.
Yeah. For me, it was seeing it at E3. That's where
E3?
For me, it always was like it was reality once you showed it at E3, because that was like generally the first public showing of the game, and you've got people playing it and getting excited about it. It's like, we were showing Heavy Gear 2. Let's see what we were showing. We were showing Crisis, and we had Robin Williams come look at the game, right? And it's like, wow, it's crazy.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think I'm sure those days will be back again. We were supposed to go to GDC, and we were at PAX right before the pandemic. I got to go to PAX East. I think that was the last major global event that happened with lots of people before everything got shut down. I think, and some of it comes down to like discoverability, right? Just bad timing. I have a friend who worked at Boss Key, Joe Helper, and they had this great game Boss Key was Cliff Bleszinski's studio, a pretty large studio filled with veterans. I mean, this team knew how to make games. A lot of them are previously from Epic and other places. But for that game, which I think is a was a fun game. It was really beautiful looking, really nice mechanics. It was very fast paced. It was just shitty timing. These guys came out right when Overwatch came out, and right when Overwatch was super popular.
Yeah,
and they just didn't stand a chance. And it's not that much different from like a movie opening that happens to open at the same time as another movie that just is a little bit better. It gets more excitement, and then it just kills a movie that would otherwise have been good. And unfortunately, that does happen with games too. You're not so limited like you are with movies in terms of windows, but sometimes it's just bad timing. It's just great game, just the wrong time. And I think a lot of games do suffer that fate, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
One thing you learn is never go against Blizzard. just don't do it.
That's true.
Just don't do
in terms of timing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I think
like if they made a hardcore space game, I would just cancel the project.
I wouldn't.
I think we're safe.
One of the great things that's happening now. So the reason why we were supposed to go to GDC is I was at this game conference called MIGS in Montreal last year, and I saw this technology that this game company was showing off. The company's called Genvid, and at their booth they were showing people walking up to basically bot matches or multiplayer games that were in progress, and you could basically interact with that game in real time without having that game installed on the computer. And you've probably seen games like this on Twitch. What's the one? Marbles on Stream, I think, is a big one. Where basically people are engaging with a game that they do not have installed. And especially lately, the Twitch has just blown up, right? And just watching people play games is just off the charts. So finding ways to engage and bring those viewers in, so more people can have the experience of what you're making, but beyond the people that are the gamers themselves. That's a very new concept, and I think that's something that we're going to see just a lot more of in games, and potentially other things too, like films and TV. The sky's the limit with this kind of technology. But I looked at it like, to me, it was like, oh my, how are you guys doing this? It's pure magic. So we were lucky to be able to have a follow-up conversation with them. And now we're partners, and we're going to be supporting it when we launch. We have a test right now. We could show off if anyone's interested. But basically, if you're watching a match in our game, you'll be able to put a bounty on one of the players in the match, or you could wager on them. So it kind of makes it like a sporting event for the spectators. And again, the spectators do not have the game installed at all. They're basically engaging with the stream. So it's kind of technology that developers integrate in their game, and then it's compatible with different streaming services. Yep. I feel like that, that's going to really be a big help towards discoverability and letting games kind of broaden their audience, because it's not just people playing them. People that are watching people play are going to be able to be part of it, and that's a pretty new thing. So I think that'll help developers.
Yeah, Gen X and Gen Y love to watch their video games be played. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I know we were talking about this with that whole idea of the growth of esports and how it is becoming very much big in terms of the audience side of things. Because we've been playing games for years now. Like, the act of playing games at a competitive level has been really going on since the 90s. We saw this with EVO, and I forget the one from the StarCraft one that was around, I think, until like the end of the last decade.
StarCraft,
yeah. And like they had their own shows, and really didn't start blowing up until the rise of Twitch and YouTube over this past decade, with having more people being able to experience these games. And we've seen this, I think, in the smaller scale. Like, we've seen some games go over, you type in your Twitch ID or your Twitch profile, and then that game interacts. But there really hasn't been kind of like a universal software or something that, a developer can use and get that interaction regardless of the game. And regardless of the streaming service as well, because a lot of these are either limited to Twitch or Mixer right now, from what I've seen.
And I think it's a great time because they basically just canceled every sport on Earth now. So what are people watching? It's a perfect time for esports. It couldn't be better. And it's like, I hear that Formula One racers were playing video games and racing Formula One cars and stuff like that now. pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It is wild. The other thing that Amazon told me that I was very fascinated by is they own Twitch, and they said that funny enough that there are some games that there are many more viewers of that game than there are owners or players of that game. And for them, the challenge was working with teams internally and externally that are able to kind of take advantage of engaging, those people who are really part of the experience, but like I said earlier, don't own the game. So I think Genvid is definitely, we're very proud to align ourselves with them, and I think that you'll see a bunch of other people entering that space as well. But yeah, I think it's a new thing for developers to try to think about ways to make because I know we were bouncing off a lot of ideas and how we would be able to use this kind of technology. Like, because all along with development, we're thinking about the players of our game. We're not really thinking about the people watching. So it's a really definitely a shift in the way you're looking at it.
Yep. And one thing that I wanted to touch on that we were talking about a few minutes ago regarding accessibility, that, like, for me, like, I've been using the term playability myself when I talk about a lot of the onboarding, the UI, especially quality of life features. I feel is a very underrated aspect when it comes to kind of building these games. And it is, I think, a very hard line to walk. Like, for myself, I am not the space sim guy. Like, I did not grow up playing that genre. I have very little experience with it. And the games that I have played in the past, even ones that, friends of mine who are, super hardcore fans that they will recommend me try, I just bounce off of because I don't have that background. And it's very much the same way. Like, if I would recommend a platformer to somebody who's never played one, if I tell somebody, oh, go just play Super Meat Boy, that'll be your first platformer, they're going to it's not going to work for them. And it is very hard, extremely hard, again, for especially independent developers. You said, with your team, you are all experts at your game. You know how your game plays. But how do you present that to somebody who has never heard of your game before and do it in a way that doesn't, again, repel your own existing fans? Like, these are... A lot of
focus testing.
Yeah. And, like, these are the kind of discussions that I think always separate, good developers from kind of like the masterclass designers. You mentioned Nintendo earlier, like games that Nintendo built. Nintendo has really been on the ball when it comes to onboarding. They don't make, hardcore, very, niche-driven games, but it's very easy and very approachable to play a Nintendo game. But like on the complete opposite end of that spectrum, we have, again, like Kerbal Space Program, that if you don't already have a background in rocket physics, you're not going to be doing too much in that game when you start playing it.
Or something like Sekiro, which that game is so hard that I cannot play it. I mean, it's like I started the game and it's just killing me when within the first literally 10 minutes of gameplay you hit a boss that I can't pass, and I took it out of the Xbox One, and I played Kingdom Hearts 3 because I had to get a taste out of my mouth of that game. And it's by the guys who did Demon Souls and Bloodborne. I really love Bloodborne. That was fantastic, but this is a whole nother level of hard. Yet it's super successful.
Oh, I could talk about Sekiro. Oh, we gotta be careful. That's a 2-hour cast right there. Because I broke that game really well when I played it.
How do you get past that Yamato, that first guy? I mean, is it the counter? What is it? I just haven't been able to figure it out. The timing?
It's all about that parrying. That's the entire game in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's monstrous.
Have you played Cuphead?
I have. Oh, yes.
That's a tough one too, man.
Oh, the tough games I've played, and my audience knows that I play the games on the hardest difficulty because I'm part masochist, I think. I played God of War on Give Me God of War difficulty, and that was an experience doing that on your first run through that game.
Yeah, I usually play one step down from the monster, from the insane version because I like to still have a fun time with it. I'm playing Jedi Fallen Order now, and I almost have to drop that down a difficulty level because I've hit some bosses that are just mind killing. Right? I mean, they're just monstrous. And yeah, I think you have to have the reflexes of a 12-year-old kid to be able to beat this stuff. Right? It's crazy.
The one that I'm stuck on right now is Neo 2. That one's been killing me all over the place. And again, like, there's so much like we can talk about with design. And as a quick time check, we are just about an hour and 20 in. It feels like we just barely got into things. But
we're good to go. So let's go as long as you guys want. If there's, I see people asking some questions. We'll be happy to answer questions from the viewers. I know Sharky's put up a bunch. Yeah. So we're happy to, whatever you guys have planned for us. I've got no plans tonight. I'm free.
All right. Well, we'll see how long our voices will last. One question that did pop up earlier. Let me scroll back up here. Gavin Looker asked this. What was it like to change engines? Do things carry over fairly seamlessly, or is it mostly rebuilding from the ground up?
A lot of rebuilding.
Woo! It's starting from scratch. We prototyped in Unreal 3, and we had a coder working on that, and he was the lead coder on a game called Ravaged, and that was a vehicle-based multiplayer game. And we basically took the helicopter model, which was very similar to the Little Bird in Battlefield 2. So it was and that more or less flies like a spaceship. And we took that as a base, and we actually prototyped the game, and we got it up and running. And then we were approached by Turbo Squid, which was the engine that I think Autodesk was doing, and we moved to that engine because it had some really sweet graphics. And we were on that engine for a while, but we just ran into some big headaches on that engine. So it took us literally a year to move over from Unreal 3 to the Autodesk engine. It took us another year to move off Autodesk to Unreal 4, even though we were moving back to a platform that we'd sort of been on, because we'd made so many changes in the Autodesk version. And we used the Autodesk as our Kickstarter pitch engine, and it looked great. I mean, the graphics were amazing. But to move from that to the new one, the programmer left because it was such a challenging. We had we had Noah Brewster step up as our technical designer, and he's just hung in there and made it work. And he learned a lot of stuff about networking and everything like that to make it work, because Unreal is not really set up to do space sims. It's set up to do shooters. That's kind of it's made to do shooters. It's made to do third-person action games. But trying to squeeze a hardcore space sim out of that. So, for instance, like, our maps can only be 80 kilometers in distance, and our ships can easily get up to 1,000 meters a second. So you do the math that you're going to shoot across the battle space pretty quick. So we had to make a lot of special design considerations when we moved. And so it wasn't just the programming of it, it was actually the design of it and the art of it, because the way we did our art had to be dealt with in a completely different way. So every aspect completely changes when you move to an engine. So and even when you upgrade an engine like Unreal, they have a lot of upgrades. That takes time. That takes at least 2 weeks where you're broken and you're upgrading to the new, if you're brave enough to do that. And we are, and we're crazy enough to do it. God bless our tech team. And because they want those new tasty features that are in there. Hair shader. I don't know why we need a hair shader, but we want to move to the newest cool features, and that is time consuming too. So it's no small task. You've got to be on a slow boil to do it, where the game will be done when it's done. I don't think you can really be on a legitimate schedule if you're going to be moving around engines like that, because there's no way you can schedule that time and the manpower needed to make it work. It's frightening.
Yeah, you really have to do your research when you're starting a project to see what is the best engine for what you're trying to make. And luckily, there's some great options now. Obviously, like I said, we're big fans of Unreal, but there's also open source engines like the Godot engine. It's spelled Godot. It's also Unity. There's also more entry level like Game Maker. But I think there's great articles and videos comparing the different engines based on what you want to do with them. And you have to look at what your talent of your team and their background experience is. If you working with people who just have never touched Unreal before and they're all Unity, it might be a little tough if your schedule is tight. I think it's not a recommended thing to go jumping around engines. I think we were prototyping, so it wasn't such a big risk for us because we were really just fooling around, trying to get something working. We obviously would have preferred to stay on one engine, but we knew once we started really going to swing at things, what the best engine would be, which is where I ended up on Unreal 4. It's a tough thing to switch.
Okay. Another question from Oscar. When changing engines, what has more weight? The new options available for the game, or how easy would be to port/salvage work already done? And what makes you consider the switch?
For us, it was the features of the engine that we used as a primary pull, because we had no idea. When you're making the decision, you don't really know how hard it's going to be at the time to switch things over and port things over. So you're really just looking at, okay, what do they have that we can upgrade to, as opposed to, what are we limited to here? Like, destructibility is something that is always evolving in video games, and you certainly always want to have, the one that runs the best and can do the most destructible. So and that's why Unreal is absolutely we love Unreal, because they're always adding stuff to Unreal. I mean, they're always upgrading everything from putting Houdini in as their graphics engine and Wise to their plugins that they use, to the new features. Every time they'll add new features that make it easier for developers to do things. So it's always it's always that candy hanging on a stick that you're, oh my God, do we want to do this now or do we want to wait? And but it's all, I think it's usually the features that you go for when you're changing.
Yeah, and you also have to look at I'm always looking at the business side of things, but you have to look at the licensing too. Epic happens to have a really nice friendly model for the Unreal Engine. And other engines, have some kind of cost, except for Godot. I think you want to, what's the best fit for your, for your game, and like I said, the experience level of your team is really important. And also the merges to the latest aren't such a big deal if you don't fool around with under the hood too much. I think that's when, as you start to have, I know some people who work on Unreal and they can merge update in a day, no problem, because they're not messing around with too much of the underlying code. But for us, for the reason Jack mentioned, we have to.
Yeah. And there's definitely a discussion to be had about, again, working on your own engine versus taking an engine and modifying. We've had several talks with developers who have done that, and again, it's one of the very nightmarish and fascinating aspects when you're trying to design a game.
I am not a technical guy, but for some reason, every team I've gotten on, we made an engine from scratch. Happened on MechWarrior 2, happened on Heavy Gear 2. Of course, it happened at Crytek, and every time, and it happened when we were at Midway too. I got stuck with the new engine, and basically, you're sitting around as a design team. Literally, I remember when we were doing the Cry engine. That was for Crysis was like Cry Engine 2, because the first one was used for Far Cry. We were a year into it, and the programmer was excited and came to our office and said, "Oh, I got something to show you! I got something to show you!" And he showed me a textured triangle floating on the screen. I was like, "This is a year," but I mean, I didn't know technical. I didn't know all the, millions of hours of code and work that went into making that, and what a huge breakthrough it was. For me as a game designer, I was like, okay, how do I put the character in? And that, of course, that was several months off. But I would not recommend building your own engine unless you've got like the best. You need an R&D team of probably 20 people if you're going to build your own engine, and they all have to be really good. And and it's going to be scary if you're building your own engine. And really, how are you going to compete against something like Unreal? And really, they only take 5% of your cut for most products. So it's absolutely worth it to come in there with an engine that's solid already, especially as an indie developer. I mean, it's not a small task. Trust me on this.
Yeah, I mean, some of it depends on the scope of your game. If you're doing something really small, it's not such a big consideration. But I think like the companies Jack mentioned, a lot of larger studios or publishers will make their own engine because they just want free reign and they don't want to pay for anything because they're expecting to have so many units sold, and why for the money they'd pay to an engine company for licensing, they can make it on their own. So, and they do have much more experienced team. I think the Dice obviously uses their own engine, the Frostbite engine. So some teams can do it, but I think you have to be pretty good.
Crytek had a 40-person R&D team, and they were all from Russia, right? Every one of them. And Russian coders are the best. That's just the way it is. They take math from kindergarten, and they get in there, and they're just amazing, stunning programmers. And it was still a challenge. A lot of stuff, like we had a guy write a physics engine from scratch, right? And he was like, "I'll be done in 6 months." And we didn't see him. He'd come to work every day, locked himself in his office. And 6 months later, here's your physics engine. And it's like, how does that even work?
Amazing.
Oh, good. No. I think what you described there was like, I made this triangle. I think that could be like a comic strip to describe programming right there.
Yeah, it was funny. We had a lot of fun stuff like that at Crytek, because it's like we were doing it and we were making it, and of course we were going for photorealistic graphics, the best graphics in the world, and literally every feature that was on the latest card, Chevot wanted in there. So it didn't matter what it was, soft shadows, soft particles, jelly physics, every single thing you can imagine. And we put it in there, and then I was looking at it, and I was like, yeah, we need to make these trees breakable. And the programmers, they literally were getting ready to keel haul me because I asked for breakable trees, because generally most games do not have breakable trees. I mean, it's like, it scares people to think about breakable trees, and they just wanted to keel haul me. And then a week later, they had a breakable tree that ran perfect, and they had completely breakable stuff. So they all got T-shirts printed up that said, "Hard takes a week, and possible takes a month." I forgot what the T-shirt said. "Impossible takes a week" at Crytek. So they were really super proud when they were able to do that. But you never know that I was like, I'm not a programmer, so for me to ask for something like that, it wasn't a big deal. And I do that all the time with Noah and our guys on the team. I'll ask for something that doesn't seem like a big deal, but it turns out to be a massively huge deal. Right, because I just don't understand the coding involved in it and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole indestructible tree concept has been a funny one in the game industry. I forget. I must have played a game lately that you can knock trees down. I mean, I just knock down every tree that I walk by just because.
I wanted real indestructibility. I wanted real destructibility because I wanted one thing that was in my head because we put a Gatling. We put a handheld Gatling gun in the game, like an M60 that usually was mounted to a helicopter, but we had the character could carry that around. And I wanted the scene from, if you remember, Predator. Dutch got in there, and I don't think Dutch was Arnold's character, but they had the other character that had the Gatling gun, and then they said, "Light it up," and he takes the Gatling gun and he just strafes the whole wood, and the trees are all popping and going down. So literally when we got that working, we could recreate that moment, and it became a real wow moment in the game. And I don't think the game would have been as cool if if we would not have done that.
Yeah. I think the one thing, like, as we've been talking about, like, game dev and design titles, one thing that I think I've really come to appreciate from the independent space is the aesthetics that developers can come up with. Because you guys we've been talking about the Unreal Engine. It is a very powerful engine. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're using the most powerful engine if you don't have, the artistic side down. And, like, as we talked about before with, like, the games that hold our attentions versus the ones that don't, I have seen plenty of games that make use of the Unreal Engine, and it just looks so... I guess the only word I can think of is, like, generic. Like, we've seen developers who will make use only of pre-made or store assets with, like, no attempt at changing or doing any kind of work to them, and the game looks all the worse for it. And I have seen some impressively beautiful, like, pixel art, 8-bit, 16-bit style games that, they just blow my socks off when I look at them, just how amazing, this game can look.
Yeah, that comes down to basically your art team skill and the visualization of the art director. I'm gonna correct you on one thing when you say aesthetics. Because my students, and I know some of them are watching, they'll kill me if I don't say this. When we're talking about aesthetics in academia, game academia, we're talking about the aesthetics that how does the game make you feel, other than how does the game look. So, like, when you say aesthetics, you're not really talking about the art. You're talking about, like, the aesthetics of Fallout would be post-apocalyptic scavenger, right? So if you've ever heard the concept of MDA, mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics, that's so I just had to say that because my students will kill me because I correct them all the time on that. So I'm sorry I had to correct you on that.
That's all right. No, I get free game design course. It's perfect here.
Yeah.
It's funny though, but don't you feel like in most cases, like I know we all go after really, especially in the black. I know we do this crazy, in terms of trying to make the game as realistic looking as possible. And we're working with NVIDIA on RTX, to get ray tracing in the game. So we're Minecraft even has ray tracing now, but I feel like it all comes down to gameplay. I feel like there are games that could be really not that really impressive looking, but if the gameplay's there, I think players really don't care as much. I think we're much more critical as developers than gamers are. That's just my experience.
You definitely have some games though that are all art, right? And they make it because of art, and it might be something like they have. You take a game like Heavy Rain that is, there are no game mechanics in there other than, like, simple, absolutely simple puzzle things, but the art is so amazing and the story is so amazing, because story is something that's similar to art. Narrative is similar to art, where it's something you don't really need in a game is good narrative, but if narrative is over the top amazing, it can be a selling point of the game, just like art can be a selling point of the game. Yeah. But typically it's the game mechanics that are the thing that make or break a game.
Yeah, there are definitely those games that do both very nicely. And I talked about Cuphead before. Cuphead, the visual style is so different. It's like an old time cartoon, and the gameplay is pretty awesome. But yeah, it's rare. I think a lot of times with the students, I tell them don't be so hard on themselves in terms of the art. Just focus on making sure it's really fun. Because look at some of the old games we played way back in the day. There was no art. It was so simple, but you still had a great time and have great memories playing those games.
Wow!
So I just tell people don't get too hung up on it.
I'm so different. I hit them hard on the art. I'm like I said, you got to have good game design, but your art has got to be. You at least have to have a vision with your art. You've got to have have an artistic visionary working on the project, because it has to be consistent. And even if it's a certain way, like it's realistic or abstract or cartoony or whatever you have to do, it's got to be consistent. And generally, people now even though we say that game mechanics are the most important thing, most games are only seen through as videos first. So the art is the first impression that you're getting of the game. So it will be the thing that pulls people in there. Now, after you play for a while, it's the game mechanics that keep you going. But I would think art itself is the thing that hooks you even more than the game mechanics.
I think, I mean, definitely the art can't look bad, and it has to look consistent. I agree with that.
Right there.
But I think that, and obviously if you're doing something like super generic, I guess maybe, but I don't know. I maybe in the minority.
Well, he made a good point that like people who use assets from the Unreal Store, when you're using those assets, it's looking like every other game, and immediately, even though those epic build assets are just absolutely top of the line and run with the engine perfectly,
but you've seen them before. Yeah,
is that Infinity Sword? Have I seen that? Is that Fortnite?
It's the same. Yeah. There we go. I'm back.
Anyway.
I had that same thing happen when I played Dauntless. That was on the Epic Games Store, which is kind of the PC version of Monster Hunter. And the whole time I was playing Dauntless, like, this just looks like Fortnite to me. Like, I just felt like I was just playing like a Fortnite offshoot, as opposed to its own game. And like consistency with art, I think is a big one. Like, this is something I've seen a lot, especially from a lot of smaller developers, that you don't need, photorealistic graphics. You need something that looks coherent. It looks like somebody actually spent time, making this game look this way. And again, like, I have played so many indie games that I've lost count of everyone who looks like they just use like pixel blocks, and that's their entire art form, and there's nothing else to it. And
one thing, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, if you've seen the game, what was it? Was it The Last Door? Was that the name of it? Let's see, really fast. Yeah, if you looked at the game The Last Door, this was done by the Game Kitchen. I think they went on to do Blasphemous. The entire game is literally pixel blocks. That is their entire art style. But it still looks like, it looks coherent. It looks like they want this game to look this way. And then I play games like Sharky, who's my co-host when we do the live shows. He can attest, we have seen some very hard to look at games, like, for some of these store pages.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed, like, we look at all the festivals that are out there, and we encourage our students to enter in game festivals. And probably the Oscars of the game industry at this point is the IGF, Independent Games Festival, that happens during GDC. If you look at all the winners, every one of them has a unique art style, and they have to be they all look different from each other.
Yes.
But they might be something made to look retro. It might look like a game that came out of the 80s, but because they've got such an amazing take on it and they've got their own unique version, that's the thing that makes it work, right?
Yeah. One of my favorites, and as a student I always forget their name, Amanita Design, who does a Machinerum. They did another game, I think last year. It was like a kid-based game. Like, their art just wows me whenever I see it in action.
I just noticed on chat, I've got one of my friends on chat who's a teacher at SCAD, Cyril Gouchard. He just said pixel art rules in the chat, but he's making a great game. He's making a VR game, and the world is 3D and made in Unity, and all the monsters are 2D. They're all like pixel based monsters.
Okay.
Completely unique, cool look. So it's like it depends on he's got a lot of interest in that game, that just because he's come up with something that nobody else has thought of.
Yeah, and I think, like, right there, that's one of those very interesting lines, and it really, I think, drives at the point when we talk about these kind of this difficulty of game design, is that on one hand your game needs to be completely different and unique from everybody else. On the other hand, it still needs to be something people can relate to. Shark and I, we've co-opted the term safely extreme when we talk about game development like this. And it is very tough to walk that line. Because if your game is too unique, and this is another thing, I'm sure you guys, with the students that you've played their games, can attest to this. Like, we have played games that are 100% unique. I've never seen anything like it. But the experience just, it's not enjoyable to play. It's something I've never played before, but it's like, maybe this is why they don't make a game like this.
Yeah, it's a hard call. It's and that's that's by its definition, to make something original is to make something niche, and it may take off and it may not. You really, you're risking a lot, and you're really you're taking a big chance when you spend you spend your valuable days of your life working on something that you feel really excited about. But if nobody plays it, then essentially you've kind of wasted your time during that. Even though for me it's more the journey than the destination. It almost, the game industry almost encourages you to be me too, and I'm using that in another way than we know it is. But you don't want. You're going to get a lot more people interested if you're a shooter, or you're a 3D action game, or you're now if you're a survival game, or you're a MOBA, and you just kind of riff on that. People are going to get your barrier to entry is going to be a lot lower than if you come up with something completely new that no one's ever seen before, like Kerbal. When Kerbal first came out, that was for me very inspirational, because for me, since creating games is my art form, I always want to see the avant-garde stuff. I always want to see the new stuff, and that I want to see people pushing the boundaries. I don't really need to see, the games that are, even though they might be more successful, like take Fortnite. I don't really need to play Fortnite because I played PUBG, right? And I don't need to get that take on the game, even though, you can't argue with the success of Fortnite. It's made billions of dollars, and certainly that's a draw for people. But for me, that's not why I'm into the game business. It's not to make those kind of games. It's to bring something new to the table.
Yeah, and like for myself, again, with all the indie games I play and where I really like grow my appreciation and understanding of design, like it's harder these days for me to get into a AAA game than is an indie game, because I don't want to play the same experience for 40 to 60 hours. If I'm going to do something, I want to play something that I haven't seen before, or I haven't seen it at this particular take. And
yeah, but you're a gourmet, right? Yeah. You have gourmet taste.
I know. And it is hard. I think I actually am writing. I think I just posted an article on Game Wisdom about this, about kind of like when I look at reviewing games, that for me it has become more about the experience, and like kind of trying to divine there what the developer wanted to do, and did they achieve that. And it is very hard, I think, to approach games like this, because like for people who don't play a lot of indie games, they only see the cream of the very crop. Disco Elysium, Celeste, Cuphead, so on. And those games don't necessarily represent, I think, the indie market. And like as you guys have been saying, most of the indie games are built to be more on the niche side of things. And one of the funniest things that we've talked about with a lot of the fans here is that like when an indie game blows up and everybody's talking about it, like for me, like you just describe as a gourmet, it's like I've already played that, reviewed it, and I'm on to the next game. It's like that's not a big deal for me. Like that Street Fighter quote from the movie where I'll draw, like that was just my Tuesday. I already played that award-winning game. It didn't change my mind. I'm on the next award-winning game.
Yeah. I'm kind of a sucker for AAA games. I mean, last year I played Far Cry 5, and even though that had a lot of elements that are in a lot of games now, the way open world, the way they're using the open world mechanic, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I had a good time like every moment that I was playing it, and even the DLC called New Dawn, it was amazing to me because the characters were really strong. The weapons were really good. All the things they did it really well. So for me, I'm still a sucker, still a sucker for the AAA stuff, and I try to stay pretty current with that stuff, because it's like I definitely want to see what the the best of the best are out there doing with 15. Like I'll play it when Assassin's Creed comes out, even though it's been the same game for the last 20 years. I mean, literally the same game. When Odyssey came out, I jumped on that and played it just to to be in ancient Greece and just to see what their take on it was. Even though they didn't really add that many mechanics to it, it was still the same game. It's basically Black Flag, but put in ancient Greece. For me, it was the content and the draw of like, oh, cool, I want to see how they incorporate what time period in Greece it is, and because they recreated Athens. So I could walk around Athens and see how the Acropolis looked in its heyday and stuff like that, and it was just fascinating to me. So I'm still a sucker for that stuff.
I think I play more of Assassin's Creed Origin, like the discovery mode in ancient Egypt, than I did the actual game. Just like walking around like Egyptian architecture like that. You
know what the truth is? I couldn't get through Origin. I got bored of it. I got real tired of it, and I didn't finish it. Yeah. But Odyssey, I loved all the way through. So it's really weird how some things like just strike you, and then some things you just I got tired of Origin really fast. It's still on my play pile because I want to go back to it, but so I got bored of it and walked away from it.
I have like 5 different Assassin's Creed games I picked up from either sales or giveaways that I haven't even had a chance to play yet. They're all on my Uplay account, just like waiting for me to play. And I just reinstalled Anno 1800 last night, so that's going to be a good month right there.
Try Odyssey. Odyssey's really good. I mean, I think to me that's been the best. That's other than I think Assassin's Creed 2, which was my favorite.
Oh yes.
I think Odyssey is up there in the quality of Assassin's Creed 2. The way they put it together, it is really solid.
Definitely.
I think I played that on Stadia. It was pretty good.
Let's see. Another question that came in. If you guys are free in the future, I'm going to throw out right now, like, I am more than happy to have you both back on. Like, there's still so much we can talk about here.
Sure, man. This has been a great time. Yeah. And I want to get a copy of your book signed, too, so you have to send me your books.
Nice. Let's see. Another question that came up. This was a while ago. Where was it? Oh, here it is. Mr. Elrud asked, with game development running for 7 years now, how are you managing to cope with changes on the market? And I think that's a very challenging topic especially for independent developers. I have spoken to developers who have worked on games for 3, 5, I think one developer was running it for at least 10 years when it first came out, and it is very tough. We made that joke earlier about how, if Blizzard makes a game of the same genre, just don't make that game anymore. But
for us, well, it goes back to the whole thing of niche, right? It's like for us, the fact that we put real science in there and we use that as a basis, that has been the one thing that no one else has touched outside of our team, because we literally have to have a physicist working on the team. He's getting his doctorate from Notre Dame right now, Zach El-Haj. He has to vet everything that we do to put it in the game. So like when we were making the game, we found out that anti-gravity is not a thing and it will never be a thing. So we were like, okay, we have to build our ships completely different. Like, in fact, I'll give you an example. Most ships that you see, like in Star Wars and Star Trek, they have decks. They have decks like an ocean liner, right? Where it's like you have an up and down. But when you have a ship that's actually traveling space, it has to be built like a skyscraper because you have to have your feet toward where the engine is. So when you put 1 G of gravity, you can have 1 G of gravity in the ship. So the ships actually have to be built in a completely different fashion than what you would see. And we learned that there's no stealth in space. So because I can take a telescope right now and I can see Saturn. So there's no way you're going to hide. And because of the way the ships work and they have to have a lot of thermal exhaust, you can see them literally from the Earth. You could probably see something in orbit around Mars if it's burning hot enough. So, so certainly in a battle space situation that's, you're dealing with 80 kilometers, nothing is going to hide from you. And same thing with shields. A big staple of every science fiction game is force field. Right, you got Star Trek, you got shields are holding. You want to hear that, and when you don't have it, and then Zach's like, yeah, the shields will never work against work against kinetic damage or even lasers. It just is not, the science is not there. So for us, we had to no shields. That was a hard one for me because for a game designer, you rely on that to keep the game going for a while, and you can take damage, but you're not cutting into your thing. So we had to look at tank technology and reactive armor and different types of armor types. So we were forced, because of that constraint, to dig deeper into our weapons design and our component design, everything like that. So as a result of that, for us, even though we've been going for all this time, we're still absolutely original out there on the table. Now, that's not to say, something else will come out there and beat us to the punch. But, we were really scared. Like Edmar pointed out, Star Citizen was announced after we started working. And, we just broke into a cold sweat because they were like real Newtonian physics and we've got $250 million. So, you start getting real nervous when you see stuff like that. But they only use Newtonian physics in the most basic way, right? Which is a 6 degrees freedom of the ship. But they had shields and they had faster than light travel, which is another, hand wavium, like we like to say, because that's never going to happen. So for us, we stay unique because we have a pure core. That our core is we feel very strong with the hard science. And if somebody else comes up there and they try to do a hard science game, they'll be compared to us, right? Like we're one of the only games. There's a great website out there called Atomic Rockets, and they specialize in a lot of space. NASA people go on there, and all they talk about is they extrapolate science to the future, and they say what would actually be around in 100 years or 200 years and stuff like that. We and Kerbal are the only games that actually got the Atomic Rocket seal of approval. So I think it's a lesson that if you have an original idea and you have a strong core, you can, even though you go for a long time, no one's going to jump in there and steal your thunder, right? So like I said, I'm not too worried about Blizzard or Bungie coming in there making a hard science game, because they're going to want to make games that are more accessible to people.
So I think you can put it as one of your marketing plugs. We're going to ruin the science fiction for everyone. All the science fiction dreams you've had will be ruined when you play our game. No shields. It has to be realistic.
Yeah, but on our side, I think we're very close to, at least as far as we can know. People might discover an element that we haven't thought of, or a new type of science might be invented that we haven't thought of, that might completely radically change everything in the way everything works. Like faster than light travel or teleportation may become a reality. But for us, it's like, what would really happen in 200 years? For us, we feel that's a real draw. And we feel that people want to, for science fiction, we put the science back in science fiction in a way. And, we really are looking at that. And for us, it's now our creed, even though we've had to take, some liberties with a few items to make the game work. We feel that is the thing that has enabled us to, continue working on the game after all this time and still stay interested.
I think the other thing too is some of the teams that Jack mentioned were a little worried about Star Citizen being announced when we were just starting work. For me, I was super excited because they did really well, and that meant there was a hunger for the space genre. And I look at it kind of like it's like if you have a town and there's like one bar in town, if a second bar opens up, that first bar doesn't have anything to worry about. If anything, there's something to celebrate because that more people it's more customers for both. Yeah. And I think that Star Citizen, Elite Dangerous, and Eve, and all the other great games out there that are in the space genre, I think that they all help build the audience for this genre. And I'm big fans of each of those games. I'm a backer of Star Citizen, and I think that's going to be, I'm not saying that you want to be developing a game for as long as we have, without having it fully out there. Our backers have copies of the game, obviously, but we have not put the game out there officially to the general public on purpose because we want to wait until we feel like it's ready. And we are pretty close. We're probably going to have something out that other people can play by the end of this year. So I think that's definitely something that you want to scope your game accordingly so you get something out.
What-
Ideally, like the Rocket League formula was pretty great for them, where they just built up a hardcore fan audience and they engaged with that audience to kind of make that game better and better and better and better. And that game also, like us, everyone on that team was doing other stuff while they were making Rocket League. They were doing contract work for just about every publisher in the world. Psyonix just has a great reputation in the industry of doing projects. So Rocket League was something that was a passion project of theirs internally. And that's kind of like how In the Black is. Jack, myself, and other members of the team all are working, other jobs in the industry, and we do this, with our own spare time and as a passion. We pretty much treat it like a full-time job and have full-time hours on it, but it's definitely, it's a passion project for us, and that's why it's also taking longer, right? Because we're not, we're not doing we don't have a full-size full-time team like a normal team would have if you're fully funded or working with a publisher. So, but because it's a passion project, we get to really enjoy making something that we feel very strongly about.
Yeah. What's that old saying that conservative supply siders say? A rising tide floats all boats.
True.
And yeah, I think that's something that I've seen definitely a lot out in the independent space, of that passion that goes into these games. And this is something that when we were doing when I was playing all the games from the Steam Spring Festival, it's not easy for me to say rapidly. Like, there are games on there that you can tell that the team enjoyed making this game, or they enjoyed this concept. And it sounds simple when you say it like that, but it's so hard, I feel, to convey that to somebody. Because, like you said, like, with trying to balance the realism side of things, like you said earlier, you could make this even more realistic, but it would become almost an unplayable experience for outside the super hardcore level.
Yeah, Kerbal is pretty realistic.
Yeah.
But, I would hate to try to play a combat sim in Kerbal.
Yeah.
Right? Because you the way space combat would really work in real life, it'd be better served as a real-time strategy game, because you would fire a missile from 200 kilometers away, and all you'd see is a blip on your radar. You wouldn't really even see what you would hit, right? So that's real space combat, is missiles, and you would basically just be punching keys on your keyboard, and then you'd wait for 2 hours, and you'd say, "Oh, we got him!" I don't think that would sell. I don't know. Maybe we should do that one next.
To try it.
And it is very tough, I think, as we've said, like with some of the games that I've played, that if anything looks off to that game, it just seems to be like magnified times 1,000, like for the consumer, like when they're trying to get into it. And I think you mentioned this earlier, Jack, about like playing games that didn't like hook you just to see if things get better. And Sharky has made fun of me for the fact that I spend more time playing like bad games than I do good games, because I want to see, like how far does that rabbit hole go? Does it get better? Like is there, like that, like the diamond in the rough, or is it just me digging more dirt for the next 30 minutes of playing?
I kind of have a term for people like you. I call you a mechanics vampire, because basically you feed off mechanics, right? You see, as soon as you got that mechanic, you're on to the next one.
Yeah.
And it's really, I don't have to have the closing of the narrative. For me, I've got to see the credits roll before I feel that a game is done, and then I can walk away from a game. But like for somebody like you, and it's cool. I mean, I think game designers should be more like you. That's what the joy is to see the mechanics and really understand what it is about those mechanics that it makes it interesting and new. And I think it's a good way to be in your field, certainly.
Yeah, and mechanics masochist. Thank you, Sharky. Yeah, that could be true.
Sharky's cracking me up over here.
It's funny. I'm reading it too.
And like for myself, like these days, I think this is a very interesting design question. I mean, this could easily be like an hour-long answer, I think, between the three of us. That for me, like these days, I don't resonate as much with long-term games as I do with something that is more short and focused. Like, we've been like multiplayer-based games. Like, for my fans watching, they know that I'm not a huge multiplayer guy by the fact that it is such a limited gameplay loop that I play one or two matches. I'm like, okay, yep, that's it. Like, I don't feel that desire to compete, which I think is a very strange thing for a lot of people.
Have you tried Scum?
Which one?
Scum.
No, I don't think so.
That is insane. It's a survival multiplayer game, and literally when you spawn into the game, you spawn in a prisoner's uniform, like the orange, the orange onesie that you see prisoners have, and a pair of tennis shoes. And by the end of that, you can be ruling a kingdom that you've made, that you've built fortresses, and you've collected all these items, and you literally, the first thing you have to do in the game is find some rocks on the ground and find a stick and like make the stick pointy so you can survive. And from that, they've got like guns hidden in the world, but they don't have the bullets with the guns, right? They just have the gun. So you've actually got to find the bullet. You've got to find the magazine. You've got to find ways to fix the guns. You've got to find, everything. You got to find food and water, or you'll die. The stuff that kind of stuff. Those are also, in a way, they're like Kerbal, that you've got to watch YouTube videos, like hours of YouTube videos, even to do the least thing. But then you come across people like I was playing that for about a year, and it just started to feel like I was going to work every day because it was so hard just to survive.
Yeah.
That we would build we would feel so proud because you'd have to chop down trees, and then you could build like a fence around your fort and a gate, and you'd have to build a lock. And people could come pick your lock if they were good enough, and people would assault us that were so good and so organized, and we would find out that they had an acre worth of compound with like everything in the room, and they lived in the game essentially, and they were just so good that you just can't compete in the game. You're just fodder for them to kill.
And that's what's kept me from playing a lot like free-to-play and mobile-style games as well, that, you're required, like, the game essentially becomes a part of your life at that point. And
big commitment.
What was that?
It's a big commitment in some games. You have to make that decision whether you want to dive in or not.
I had that feeling when I played Eve. It felt like I was going to work as an asteroid miner. Because literally, I'm logging in, and I'm going to be logged, chromium or copper for the next 6 hours, and I'm just gonna be sitting there, and my ship is logging, and I'm looking out for people to come kill me, right? And certainly the stuff they've done in the game where they've formed guilds, and their guilds can build multi-billion-dollar space stations, and they can have these battles that are 5,000 versus 5,000 people. So much that the server slows down to about 1 frame a second when they're playing. But it's fascinating that there's people that stick on there, and they stay on that so long, and they essentially have accounts. My friend played it for like 5 years, and he sold his account for like $10,000 just because people wanted to move right to the top of the heap instead of grinding.
Yeah, I have a friend, Ramin, who does he's a game economist. He played that and EverQuest, and he made so much money just playing those games at that level.
Yeah.
Speaking about realistic games, have you heard of the game Receiver by any chance?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
I haven't.
Yeah, it's a game it's realistic gun usage in a game. It's a whole mysterious storyline. It's a game that you have to, put the bullet in the magazine. You gotta put the bullet in the revolver in the chamber. You have to cock the gun. You have to make sure it's set up properly. And it's just shooting one bullet can take 20 seconds of preparation.
Scum is like that too. I mean, you don't have to because you can actually make your ammo by finding black powder and metal, and then you have to find a workbench and you can make ammo. And then you can make your bullets, and you actually have to load it into the magazine, and then load the magazine into the gun. And they have different types of ammo for different guns. So you might find shotgun bullets, but you can't use it because it only works in that certain type of shotgun. And there is an appeal to those games.
Oh yes.
For me, Scum, like I said, I stuck to it for a year and played it. I'm looking at this receiver right now and checking this out. And this is the kind of stuff that really makes me interested in games. Is that they've put stuff in there that is so detailed. It looks like portraying realistic gun mechanics. I'm just totally. I've never heard about that in a procedurally generated world. That is amazing. I mean, I'm super excited about that, and I'm going to go download it after we finish this conversation.
That's the beauty of this. Like, it's why I do like the indie showcase streams every week. That I can show off games that nobody has ever played. I played a time-looping Metroidvania last year. Vision Software said that to my audience and my fans, they know, they're sick and tired of me talking about that game. But then when I mentioned to everyone else, they're like, I have never heard of that game before. What is it? And it's so crazy again about like what games, like you said earlier, like what games reach the popular zeitgeist these days.
Yeah, PUBG was an amazing study. That was a really super hardcore game, and no one had ever seen like that battle royale mode. I mean, it was an earlier game. They came from a mod of Armed Assault, but then they did PUBG and they made it its own thing, and that should not have made it. But in fact, that not only made it, those guys sold 30 million copies at $30 a piece. They made about $1 billion on that game idea, and then of course Fortnite took the game and they made $1 billion on that game idea. So so you never know when that certain mechanic is gonna grasp the collective unconsciousness, and we're all aiming for that. Obviously, we'd all love to make $300 million or $1 billion, certainly, and no downside to that. But to get that, you really have to. I really respect the guy who made PUBG, because he had to carve that out of nothing. And he did it, and that guy's never got to work again because he's his just from his pure genius. So you got to love that about the games, that we're really the only kind of industry that you can take something from nothing and just become super rich. Like Notch in Minecraft, for God's sakes.
Oh yes.
When a game designer is outbidding Jay-Z and Beyonce for their Beverly Hills house, he's onto something, right? So and it's a game about digging blocks out of the world and making a world out of
punching
blocks
trees.
that looks horrible. But for some reason that caught on, and it's beyond belief how far that has gone, right? And how many billions of dollars that has sold.
Oh yes, and if anyone wants to donate $5 million to me, please get in touch. I'll happily take that too.
I'm sure Notch is watching as we speak.
There we go. And I think this is one of the things that I've really grown to appreciate about when I review games. I talk about this in a few of the articles I've written, that these days I can play a game that, even if I hate the game, it just does not work for me, I can at least respect what the developer was trying to do. And I think that comes a lot with just studying so many games. And I interviewed the developer, one of the guys who worked on that John Wick Hex game that came out last year. And we had this whole discussion about how even some of the things that they put in, like, they didn't particularly feel like it worked 100%. And that was simply because that was pretty much the solution they came up with. So, like, for when I play games these days, I never yell at games, I don't scream at them, I don't insult developers. And even the games that just don't work for me, like that Receiver, I played that, I think that was on one of our random nights of games. I played for like 30 minutes, like, this is not a game for me, but I can tell that there's somebody out there who would love this game.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that a VR game? It looks like it's VR.
It was not VR when I played it, but they could have added that. I know there's a Receiver 2.
When you see the gun, when you see a gun like that just floating in midair, it's generally a VR game. So I was just wondering, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, the second
Thanks
one.
for showing me that.
Oh, no problem. You should watch my Wednesday night streams, because that's when I do all the indie games, all the weird and interesting ones. I got some weird ones planned for tomorrow. Yeah, Receiver 2 came out, looks like last week. And again, like as we talked about discoverability earlier, that is the nail in the coffin for a lot of these games. That you can have an amazing game come out and nobody plays it. And sadly, I have been witness to that many times over the last 10 years.
Heavy Gear 2, I made it. We were super proud of it, and we thought it got all 90s in PC Gamer and stuff like that. And whereas MechWarrior 2 sold 5 million copies, 6 million copies, Heavy Gear 2 sold 250,000 copies. So, I mean, crazy.
Yeah, that Vision Software set game I mentioned earlier, the last time I checked, I think it had 22 reviews on Steam, and that was over a year and a half, I think, at this point of it being out. And it's rough out there. I mean, it's something, I have a presentation, I talk about the reality of game development to like kids and students, and I say, this is not an easy industry to get into. You can do everything wrong and fail. You can do everything right and fail as well.
Absolutely. No doubt.
A lot of risk. A lot of risk in making games.
Definitely. We are right now just over 2 hours and 10 minutes in. It feels like we just got started.
Quick.
I do... again, we could spend another 2-3 hours on, but I do want to at least focus a little bit on Into the Black. And like I said, again, we're all stuck in the black. I'm sorry. We're all stuck inside. So if you guys are free, have any more free time, definitely let me know.
Sure, yeah.
Let me see here. Edmar brought up, he linked me the teaser trailer for the game. This was when it was still called Starfighter Inc. I guess
we did this teaser right when we announced that the final name was going to be In the Black. So this teaser was basically like announcing the new name.
Okay. So I am going to see if OBS likes this, and I'm going to try and pull it up here. Let's see if this will work. Chances are we're going to get cut off. I think there's no way this is going to work. Get everybody perfectly. Here, let's see if this will work.
We can drop the link in the chat too.
Oh yeah, definitely. Okay, here it is. Let me play it, and ideally, it should be in motion.
It's playing.
There we go. So this was made last year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is when we wanted to call our game Starfighter Inc., but when we went to get the trademark, we found out Disney actually owns the trademark for Starfighter. So we had to.
Yeah, we knew that was very, very slim chance we would get it, but we tried for it anyway, and quickly our fears came true. But it actually ended up working really good because I think Jack came up with the name In the Black, which is a nice double entendre for obviously being in space and then earning a profit, which is a core motivation for the player in the game to earn some money. So not everyone gets a reference to double entendre, but I feel like it's perfect for what we are.
A lot of our European they just don't get it. They get the In the Black that it's in space, but they don't get the In the Black that it's you have to maintain a profit to keep playing. So, but I think it's appropriate.
And as somebody who plays a lot of the Anno games, I am well aware of what In the Black means in those kind of games. So, we've been talking on and off about In the Black for the stream. And as you said, one of the key aspects of it is the fact that it's based on real physics, on Newtonian physics and how the ships move. But as you said, like another major aspect of it is the economy side. So could you, I guess, extrapolate or clarify a little bit more about that for the people watching?
Yeah, when we looked into doing the game and we said we're going to make it realistic, we actually decided that core was super strong. So we were going to use it against all aspects of the game, not just the spaceship mechanics, but actually we extrapolated, like we looked at history and we said, where do we want to set this as a time frame? And we figured it 200 years in the future, because it gives us enough time to for mankind to, based on current projections, for us to inhabit every planet and exploit every planet. And where are we going to be on a socioeconomic level would be corporations in our world are the real power bases, and they're the ones who actually run everything. So they don't, like, now we still have governments that tell corporations what to do. In our world, corporations tell government what to do, and religion and everything else. So we said, who would be somebody in this world that would kind of work between the lines? And we decided to base it on a mercenary. Mm-hmm. So we're a private, we're part of a PMC, which is a private military company. And we're going to have a mode in there that you have to stay profitable to keep playing. And every time you go into a match, you have gear loss. So if you take a ship into a match, you'll lose your ship. And at a certain point, you'll have to start with the basic ship again and work your way up to it. So that was the concept of In the Black. And we also added a mode in there that's more like a gladiatorial version that we call Bloodsport, that it's famous recreations of battles that have happened that they've now, like Civil War recreations, but they're doing Civil War arena battles in these scenarios. And the way we're going to do it, we're going to release single player content, and that the first time you play that will be the real version of the game. And that's where you'll make your money in that, or you'll get your special whatever weapons or ships or whatever you win in that. And then after, it becomes a Bloodsport scenario that you can play it as many times as you want. But the one PMC mode is going to be like you have to stay in the black the whole time to make that happen.
And is the PMC mode, is that multiplayer or single player or a combination?
It's the PMC mode. It's going to be a combination of single player, co-op, and multiplayer. So your single player will be when we put together like a story mission that's going to need stronger narrative. That'll be something you can play by yourself, and you can go through it and see all the main story beats. But you can also play that mission with your friends if they're in there, so you can do co-op against that mission, and the game will procedurally balance itself to keep it exciting. And also, there will also be multiplayer games that we're going to put out there, and we'll have AI missions running the missions if there's not players running it, so you can always jump in there and have fun.
Okay, and what is the player size for how combat plays out? Like, how many players will be going at one time?
Right now, we're 4v4. We would eventually, and we're peer-to-peer servers. Okay. Our goal is to go dedicated server and maybe go up to 10v10 is our dream. But it'll be between 4v4 and 10v10. We've got really solid 4v4 playing right now.
Okay. I'm looking at the Kickstarter page for it, and you mentioned influences like World of Tanks and Counter-Strike. And I guess going with the kind of like the realistic aspects of space combat, I guess how lethal is like combat in this game, in the sense that we've played first-person shooter and games where you can take like 30, 40 hits and you may only be half dead. And then of course there's something like Counter-Strike and World of Tanks where one good hit, you're blown up. That's it.
Well, certainly with Counter-Strike, there's a certain weapon like the Magnum sniper rifle, and you have to, that's a one-shot, one-kill. But then a lot of the, P90s or Uzis, you can absorb quite a few shots if you're wearing body armor. Our game right now is very lethal, where you can go in and you can play. And we're testing with the smallest ship, which we call the Shrike, which is sort of our equivalent to an F-16 Falcon. Okay. That can be like certainly one missile will kill it, but one railgun shot to the pilot will kill it too, or one railgun shot to the engine will take it out of commission and will take it out instantly. So we've been having to spend time developing counter ways to stop. So we put missiles in there, and since we don't have shields, we looked into the way ships actually defend themselves, and they have something called CWIS, which means close-in weapon systems. So we had to develop CWIS for our game, which are gimbal-mounted railguns or Gatling guns or lasers that will auto-track missiles as they come in. As long as you have ammo, there's like a 75% chance it's going to shoot that missile out of the sky before it gets to you. And, we're now balancing. We're going both ways. Like, okay, now it's too good. So, because you can only carry, like in a Shrike, you can only carry up to only 3 missiles and then you're maxed out. Some of the bigger ships, you might can carry up to 20 missiles, and those will be more sustained combat. But certainly the Shrike, she's a light little bird and she can be taken out pretty fast. So we're right in the balance where we're getting it. Okay, that missile's too powerful. Let's make the Sea-Wiz more powerful. Okay, Sea-Wiz is too powerful. Let's dial that back a little bit. So, we're having to play that delicate balance game with a lot of the weapon systems. And we're introducing things like EMPs, which shut all your power off. And you have to fly your ship. All your HUD goes dark. Your, all your things that help you fly the ship normally, they all go off. So your ship is just drifting through space. And you correct it. And you've got to auto correct it and stuff like that. We're looking at things like jamming, jamming
Ejection.
systems. We're looking at ejection as a mechanic. So when your ship gets really torn up, you can eject, and so your friend can come pick you up and bring you back to the carrier. And if you've got other ships waiting in tow, you can jump in these other ships. So it's sort of round based in the way that as long as your pilot stays alive, you can keep playing the game even if you lose your ship. So we're introducing a ton of original mechanics, and that all came from the constraint of the real science. And that's one of the things that we feel is good design, is that the tighter your core and the more your constraints are, the more you got to think outside the box to come up with all these solutions, and the more you create original gameplay.
And that, that's another podcast conversation, right? That's another podcast where the discussions about those kinds of constraints.
Absolutely.
So I guess. Go ahead.
Sometimes it's a curse. Sometimes it's a blessing. That's kind of the stuff I'm laying in bed at night trying to figure out how to make the game fun. Yeah. Because it's like if you do it everything by the book and perfect science, it just frankly is not going to be fun. So whereas we have real drift and real, like in our game, if you roll your ship will roll forever. And if you start going in a certain direction using Newtonian physics, you're not going to go the other direction until you have an opposite force. So we had to put in like an auto assist where your ship, if you turn on your translational assist or your rotational assist, it will correct your ship and make it a lot more fun to play. So now it feels a little better for people. But if you get hit by an EMP or those systems get damaged, now you're going to have those systems to deal with. But the more people play, because that auto assist actually takes valuable propellant to keep it going, a lot of the more experienced pilots turn that off when they play. So they just get so good at playing it that they don't need that auto assist anymore. So it opens up whole new avenues of gameplay for us.
I'm just envisioning myself just like logging on, just being stuck in an endless roll. That'll be my entire play of the game.
I don't know if you're going to like our game.
That's what I've been thinking. And it actually takes me to 2 questions that I want to ask you guys about. The first one, as you said, we're kind of balancing the realism with the gameplay. Because this is, I think, one of the things that's very tricky with these kinds of more, again, like we use quote-unquote realism in these kinds of titles, that on one hand, you have progression, buy bigger ships, get bigger weapons, etc., etc.
Better materials that your ship is made out of.
But the problem that I think a lot of developers run into is that when you try to combine realism and progression, it sometimes ends up being very fakey or like not feeling right. And the big example of this that I've always turned to is something like The Division. That Division once presented itself as, military shooter, every bullet matters, we're in a real world, but my level 60 sniper rifle can shoot a guy in the head, and that guy can shrug it off because he's level 70.
Yeah, that's part of the way we're balancing with money. Mm-hmm. So the better the weapon or the better ship that you take into a match, the more it's going to cost you if it blows up. Mm-hmm. So, and the more if you blow that ship up, the more money that you make. If you're like, let's say you take in a stock Shrike and you go against, we've got a ship called the Hyperion that is like, whereas a Shrike in our game is a is a fighter that's probably 100-year-old design, century-old design, where the Hyperion is maybe a 20-year-old design. It's pretty new, and it's obviously much better and has much better systems and stuff like that. But if you can take your little Shrike and destroy the Hyperion, you'll make enough to buy a Hyperion on your next mission. So people are going to be really careful when they fly their ships and they go into there, because certainly it's going to be the player's choice whether they come out of there losing, a 2 million credits as opposed to making, 1 million credits if they play the right way and they get good enough with their ship. But balance wise, we looked at League of Legends, believe it or not, when we were balancing, and the way League of Legends works, that when you're playing, you as you're playing the game, you add little items and little artifacts, and they only give you like a little tiny boost, right? Like it may only give you a 3% boost in your magic use, or a 5% boost in your armor or something like that. But if you combine enough of them and you get the true recipe along with how the player plays, you get the secret sauce that you'll win. But in our game, if you take the level 3 railgun, it's going to use 5% less power, but maybe it's going to shoot 3% faster. So they're going to be small, slight changes. So by the time it's all said and done, you've got a level 10 railgun. Even though it's level 10, it's not going to be that different from a level 1 railgun. It's just going to be a little more efficient. It's going to shoot a little better, and it's going to be able to go through ammo a little better. But it's still a level 1 railgun. It'll still be able to be as effective as a level 10 railgun in the right hands. So that's kind of our ethos as we're doing our design.
Yeah, and again, that is very hard to nail down for any developer. That idea that, again, gamers are really good at picking apart designs, especially the hardcore fans. And I'm sure, again, with a game like In the Black, I bet you have some hardcore fans who are, ripping apart like every detail, every stat, every attribute of those games. And like your example of League of Legends is, I think, perfectly apt here. That, again, 2% more movement or 1.5% crit chance to a common player. It's like, who the hell cares about that? But you get somebody who knows what they're doing, who maybe knows what items can synergize with that, and suddenly that is a very viable build.
So David Westman is listening on chat, and he says realism isn't a problem. The design challenge is find the fun inherent in the situation, give the part of the player while hiding or abstracting the boring, frustrating parts. So certainly I think that goes back to the core question of balance of gameplay versus realism. At the end of the day, it's a game and it's got to be fun. So whereas we would love it to be absolutely realistic, and I'm sure Edmar can enhance this, it's got to be a fun game. So at the end of the day, I'm kind of the gameplay guy and Dave's the science guy. I'm gonna get the call because it's got to be more fun.
Yeah, there's definitely been choices. It's been few and far between where we had to make a sacrifice for realism to benefit gameplay. Like I said, it's not that often, but it does happen. One of the things, but I feel like one thing you guys touched on before with the constraints can open up new opportunities. I'm a huge fan of immersiveness. I love just being able to play in a game. That's why I like games like Elite Dangerous, where you just play it and you just feel like you're there. You're in that whole mindset of being in that game. So with our game, I always look for that too. And obviously in space, there's no sound. So any game without sound would probably be pretty boring. You'd lose interest pretty quick. But that constraint allowed us to create a system that we have the player's ship has an onboard computer, obviously, like any military weapon or weaponized vehicle would have. We have a system called the DSS, right, or the Decision Support System. And what the DSS does is it analyzes everything happening outside of the player's ship. For situational awareness, it will recreate the sound for the player. The really cool thing about that is because the player's ship system is creating that sound, like faking it, but it's based on real stuff that's happening outside the ship. It allows us to open that up to players can customize those sounds because they're not real anyway in the game world, but they're being created by the ship. So one player might want to have Star Wars type of sound, someone else might want to have something that's more military sounding. And by the way, this is something that the military does today.
Yes.
On their laser weapons, because lasers don't make a sound. So what they actually do, there's some cool videos about showing this off, but they'll actually use like Star Wars types of sound when they're firing military weapons for testing, so that everyone around knows that the weapon is live. So anyway, so that kind of constraint opened up the door to kind of new challenges. I think we've met pretty nicely, and to me, just add to the immersion of it.
Yeah, and the DSS is a component that can be destroyed, and then you have no sound.
Oh,
yeah, super cool.
Yeah, and to David's comment there about abstracting or hiding the boring or frustrating parts, that again I think has to be that balance when it comes to onboarding and playability. Because to a new player, especially to myself, like you throw things such as mass and energy, turn radius, things like that, I have no idea what the hell you're going to be talking about, and I have played many RPG and sim style games that they present the raw numbers to the player, to somebody who knows what's going on already. That stuff is as plain as day. But if you're a new player and you're trying to figure out, okay, does 1.65 firing rate mean anything to, and this gun has 2.34 burst damage. It's like, again, what is somebody new going to figure that out, or they're just going to get frustrated and just walk away?
Yeah, luckily, I feel like our game doesn't have that kind of level of complexity in play. You can definitely jump in and start playing. It may take you a few minutes to get the hang of the movement of the ship, because once you start moving, you're going to continue moving unless you reverse thrust or change direction using thrust in a different direction. But I think in any, even a car is kind of a complicated machine, right? But you can basically just turn it on and hit the gas. And if you imagine 200 years in the future, it's totally plausible that ships will be automating a lot of the things that are happening on the ship. So I feel like we strike a nice balance where you can just jump in, pick your weapon, start firing. And I think there's some stuff to learn, like I said, with movement and just understanding the interface a little bit, so what number means what, how fit, because you want to know how fast you're going, obviously, what direction you're heading in, those kinds of things. But I feel like it's pretty accessible.
Yeah, and actually takes to a very interesting question. As you said, like the game is aimed for hardcore space sim fans, but in the same vein, you're also doing things differently that other space sims have not done before. I'm sure you guys have been tracking and talking to your fan base. Like, how easy has it been for them to kind of adjust and adapt to the change?
It's funny. So I always, so as a developer, I think one of the most revealing things is to actually sit there and watch other people who've never tried your game just play. So Jack mentioned like focus testing before. And for me, the best place to do that, where you do it all day, one after the other, is like in a convention like PAX. We've been fortunate; we have great partners. We're partners with NVIDIA and Alienware and Thrustmaster. So we're often invited to show our game off at their booths, even while we're in development, to show off, what the latest gameplay build looks like. So at PAX West in Seattle last year, there were literally hundreds of people who played our game at the Thrustmaster booth where we were. I was the only developer that was able to be on site that weekend. So I got to help every single one of them play the game. And we had a lot of players that came over to play who were playing a lot of Star Citizen, who were playing a lot of Elite Dangerous. We got a few people who played Eve. And just about every single one of them said, like, oh my God, this is awesome. Like, this is so cool. Because they got it pretty quickly. But no, and the other thing, it was different. Like what makes our game different from those games, I think, is that you jump in and you start playing right away. Because it's a kind of, especially the multiplayer, it's kind of a match-based game. So you just, there's not exploring or mining. Not that there's anything wrong with those things, but our game is just a very different type of gameplay. It's just really all about the combat. But getting that kind of live feedback from people, seeing what they like, what they get a little confused about, what takes them longer to learn. I feel like that those kind of events are perfect for that. So yeah, I did get to talk with a lot of players of the space, other space games, and yeah, they definitely said it was something to learn. But literally, we had some people come back like 3 or 4 times to keep playing the same level over and over again throughout the day. So I felt like that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. And I guess as another question, in terms of like the overall like progression of the game, of course you mentioned being able to buy new ships, buy new weapons, stuff like that. Are there any aspects of character progression, as in, your character levels up, unlocks a new ship type, or gets a better firing, or more, or like kind of like RPG abstraction in the game?
Jack,
You want to? I'll answer this. No, you're not going to get skill based. You're going to have to be a real pilot. So
Okay.
you're not going to get bonuses to agility. You're not going to get the secret little enhanced robotic implant that lets you shoot faster, because we want it to be about pilot skill.
Mm-hmm.
But we are going to allow a lot of cosmetic changes for the pilot, and that's kind of how we're going to monetize the product. Is you will be able you are a pilot in the game, so you will be able to change your uniform. You will be able to change, but since we don't want to make it play to win. We can't necessarily make the uniform give you an advantage, like give you
all cosmetic.
It's all going to be cosmetic. But we got stuff like your faceplate can actually have a projection on it. So if you want to have a demon on your faceplate, or a monster, or a smiley face, or something like that, we're going to give the players the ability to do that. And you can customize your ship. We've got a really deep, we call this ship paint customizer. We've got a really, really robust way to paint your ship and put decals on it and really give it absolutely superb customization. But yeah, the only thing you're going to be able to advance is your ship, just like real life. In real life, I don't wake up and have +1 dexterity. I have to, I can get a better. I can practice on my gun, but that just means I've got the inherent skill. So that's another part of the realism. You don't really get fake experience that makes you suddenly better to do things. You actually have to do it in the game.
I think, and I think that makes it so much more rewarding to play too.
Certainly, it'll be better for esports.
Definitely.
If people, it's really about skill, and it's not about a fake progression aspect.
And I guess this is probably an important point to clarify for the people watching. Is In the Black going to be a free-to-play game, or will it be like a buy-in or retail game?
Free-to-play is what our goal has been. I think for a multiplayer game like this, you really want to have as many people in the game as possible. So another part of accessibility is can everybody actually have access to the game, period. And I feel like some other games out there that either are more pay to win or they're just too expensive to just get into. I think they're really limiting the audience, and I feel like we have an opportunity to kind of let everybody enjoy this game. And I think it'll be important for people to basically jump in on something and feel like they're not going to get killed in a second by someone who just bought a ship that was super powered for $100 or whatever. And this won't be possible in this.
Now, I guess in terms of like long-term progression, because again, with a multiplayer-based game especially, there's always that challenge of how do you keep somebody playing? What is the carrot on the stick that's going to get somebody to come back day in and day out, or every week, or etc.? Now, obviously, you guys have been working on this game for 7 years, and you're still not done with it yet. But I guess what have you thought about in terms of, I guess, either replayability or what is like the long-term goal somebody can go for with the game?
For us, we looked at World of Warships and War Thunder, where it's all about the collection of the ships. So it's like you're always going to have that next ship that's going to be right out of range that you're going to have to play in order to get it, and you're going to unlock it. It's going to have some cool systems on it. You're always going to have components and weapons that are just out of range, and you'll always be earning that next thing. There'll be a little progress bar as you're unlocking them. And we feel I mean, as a big, War Thunder and World of Warships player, I've been playing World of Warships for about 5 years, and I play that every day, and I play War Thunder every day, and it keeps me going in there, and I love playing it, and I feel that mechanic certainly will work for us as well.
We also have a pretty well developed backstory for the game world narrative. We've talked about it a little bit before, but I think that with a game like this and the way we're kind of designing it, there's a lot of potential to take these stories of the different corporations in different ways. And because we're using the solar system as as our environment backdrop, there'll be some familiarity of the different kind of environments too. So I think narrative will be part of it. You don't see that a lot in multiplayer focused games, online focused games. But with this game, I think we have the potential to do that.
Very, very interesting. Again, like as the chat is making fun of me, that it doesn't sound like it sounds like it's going to be a little bit above my head. Like I said, I am not the space sim guy, but I can certainly, again, you can definitely appreciate like the level of detail you guys are aiming for, and like you said, like it's something that very few people have, gone to that level in terms of this kind of space sim design. I guess one question, this is my novice question for you. Is there one thing that I see from a lot of these space sims is the open world aspect. You're dropped in, you have free reign to explore, go on missions, things like that. Is that something that In the Black is going to do? Or from looking at the Kickstarter page, it seems like it's more, mission by mission focus, and then you're spending your time in your hangar, customization, personalization, etc.
Go ahead, Edmar.
Well, I think when we first started working on the game, we did the Kickstarter. We were, from my experience at THQ, I knew that a single player experience is very challenging to do. You have to have a team that has a good background in AI and pathfinding, and usually requires like a whole different skill set. And it could be pretty expensive in terms of a schedule. So for that reason, I personally like playing multiplayer games most of the time. So for that reason, we really focused on multiplayer. The only complaint we actually heard from people when we did the Kickstarter was that we were not doing a single player campaign, and people thought that, like the X-Wing and TIE Fighter series, we should have a single player campaign in addition to multiplayer. Fortunately, and somewhat as a result of our partnership with this company, Genvid, I mentioned earlier, we found this fantastic company called Mercuna, who has this pathfinding technology, and it basically allows you, especially in Unity and Unreal engines, it allows you to relatively quickly get AI in the game. Their tech is not AI; it's for pathfinding, but allows you to create AI that is able to add to your gameplay. And for us, that means that we can have bots in the game, multiplayer matches. It also means that we can have a single player campaign that, in our case, we are using for kind of like onboarding, so people can kind of learn how to play the game without jumping into a multiplayer match right away. Okay. So I think players will be able to jump in, do bot matches just by themselves. So they'll be in a multiplayer kind of level, but they'll be the only real person in it, and they'll have this. It'll feel real because of the AI we're using. And people will be able to do a single player campaign, very much in the vein of the X-Wing TIE Fighter. But I think the bread and butter of the game is going to be the multiplayer matches, where you jump in and you're playing these 4v4, 5v5 matches. Whether it is a good gameplay experience for esports, we'll see. Like, you don't really design games for esports; you just see kind of it if it kind of takes off. But we all love on the team. We all love multiplayer match games, and we have fun playing our game all the time. So I think hopefully we'll have a little bit of something for everybody. I know for a fact there are people who will never touch the multiplayer because they just don't like multiplayer, so they'll just play the single player stuff. We want to support modding at some point so people can make levels for the game, and maybe potentially other content outside of that, like ships maybe down the road or something like that. And we know there are people who are just going to gravitate to multiplayer and will never touch a single player. So we'll see.
And we're kind of glad that we are not an open this, because then we'd be competing with Elite Dangerous
Yeah.
and Star Citizen, and render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, right?
And who knows if Star Citizen will be coming out by the time In the Black comes out, so they're right there going.
They've got a compelling game.
Mm-hmm.
It's like for what you're. I mean, the art is phenomenal in that game.
Beautiful.
And it's they're trying to make a lot, a full first person shooter and a full game, and you got to respect that guy. I'm a big fan of Chris Roberts. So I hope they make it. I'm looking forward to it. But we certainly want to focus on combat as our game. We want it to be. That's what we want you to be, either doing combat or planning for combat in your hangar.
Yeah. Do you see yourselves opening the game up for modding or player generated content or things like that?
We want to, for sure. I think we actually just had a meeting on this a couple days ago to figure out what would make sense, because I do feel like, my personal opinion, I'm not saying this is exactly what we're going to be supporting and when we go to early access, but my personal opinion is that I think a lot of early access titles are able to find great success and have good legs on them by supporting modding right out of the gate or soon after. And I think that it's a really good strategy to be able to let your users create content of their own, like you said, user generated content, or UGC. I'm a huge fan of that. I feel like their fans will come up with so many different ideas that the team never thought of, and to be able to open that up to people would be great. That being said, there are some technical challenges to be able to do that and figure out what you can support, because you don't want to just throw something out there and let people break stuff or just have a horrible time because the tool doesn't work good. So you have to put some thought into it. Fortunately, Unreal does support modding or base modding or a relatively straightforward manner. That's what our meeting was about the other day. So I'm hopeful. We're not promising anything yet, but I do want to support modding, and I think that just lets the game be enjoyed by so many more people down the road.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And again, it definitely extends the lifeblood for a lot of these titles, especially again with customization and personalization being so much of a focus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And eventually, the your community becomes better game design on it, because they might even be playing it more than you are and know what it needs better. So we certainly want to give that ability down the road.
Mm-hmm. Here's a gameplay question. This could be both gameplay, maybe a realism question for you guys. Will there be ships that allow multiple players to operate within a ship, or are all ships just single pilots?
Right now, it's on the drawing board that the Pegasus will actually have 3 players on there, 1 pilot and 2 gunners, and the Hyperion will have 2 players, 1 pilot and 1 Wizzo or weapons officer, because we want to give them the ability to they can actually steer their missiles themselves.
Oh, nice!
Right, so when they launch a nuclear missile, instead of depending on the AI to do it and it gets juked, they can pilot it into a little, do the old Star Wars, go down the thermal exhaust pipe or something like that. And if you have a weapons officer, you can make your weapons way more intricate and complicated and sophisticated, because they can just focus on that while another guy is just trying to dodge incoming flechettes.
Nice. Yeah, I think too, there are some people who just love different roles on a game. Not everyone wants to be like the main pilot.
Yeah.
So they might have more support roles. So we'd love to be able to support that stuff.
Yeah. Our technical designer's probably listening, and he's going to choke us afterwards. So. It's already hard enough to just do, the players without compounding multiple people on a ship. Because when you're doing that, the complexity of the net code goes up, exponentially. So while we're saying we want it, and we certainly, there's features like that in VR that are on our backlog, which means we plan on doing them. We don't necessarily know when we will do it. It'll be done as soon as we can.
And for the people watching, in the game now, how many ship classes or ship types are available?
Right now, we're gonna ship with 4 ships. There's a Shrike, which is, like I said, our F-16. It's a ECM one pilot, really small ship, really delicate. The next size up is a new ship we introduced called the Rayus, and that's really a hard science ship that your cockpit is located in the middle of the ship in a steel ball. And a lot of people are comparing it to the Rocinante from Expanse. Of course, it is much different than a Rocinante from Expanse. And it's basically a chunk of metal. And it's not a heavy weapons platform, but it can carry, like the Shrike can carry a main spinal mounted weapon, a few missiles, and some gimbaled weapons on the side. The Rocinante might hold 4 weapons or 5 weapons. The next step up is a Pegasus. That's kind of like our version of the Hercules C-130 Lockheed, where it's a configurable ship. Like you can configure it to be a missile boat where it's only holding missiles. You can configure it to be a laser where you might put 12 lasers on it and you're instantly swatting strikes out of the sky with one button push. It may be used as a refueler. It may be used as a repair ship, a recovery ship. It can be a lot of different things. And then our final ship for shipping is going to be the Hyperion, and that's like our state of the art. That would be like our let's say our F-14 Tomcat, where it's twin engine. It's got all the systems on there. It's big. It holds multiple pilots. It can take a hit, and it's bristling with weapons. But of course, it's super expensive. So that's our 4 classes that we're shipping with. We have many more on the table that we've designed on paper. But to make our ships as complicated as they are, because they all have integrated weapon systems, they all have integrated thermal heat systems, they all have integrated power systems, propellant systems. All these components make up the ship. So you're not seeing a ship with a health bar over it that you're knocking your health bar down. You're actually doing damage to the individual component. So our ships are more of a system rather than just an individual unit.
Okay.
So they're tough to make.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds fascinating, and I guess in terms of the matches themselves, one thing that I didn't ask or that I want to clarify: how long does like a typical match in the game last for?
It really depends on the skill of the pilot. If you get a bunch of pilots out there who haven't played very much and they all just come spam missiles, it can be a 1 or 2 minute match. If you have good pilots, it can go 15 or 20 minutes. So we are looking at doing stuff like round based, where you'll go in there and there'll be like 3 out of 5 rounds, where if the missions are really fast, we can extend it to be like a 20 or 30 minute play experience, or even like respawning ships. So even though that's not technically realistic, the way we've talked about in our game is you've actually got clones waiting of yourself waiting to, as soon as you go inactive as an entity, because in our universe you actually trademark your personality, and you can only have, by legal right, you can only have one existing personality at a time. Your clones can be activated in a Bloodsport mode, and you can activate them on the fly and shoot them out.
Great. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, and I put this in chat a few minutes ago. That if you have any last questions for Dragon Edmar, please get them in. I just had something. What was it? We talked about combat. We talked about that. Oh yeah. One thing I know we were talking about before the stream that you guys wanted to mention about kind of the streaming or fan interaction, that kind of aspect of the game. So I'm going to give you guys a chance to kind of explain that to the people watching.
Yeah, we touched on it earlier when we were talking about that GenVid partner that provides that technology, lets viewers interact with the game without having the game installed. So, yeah, I just feel like that's a great opportunity for game developers to think of a different audience for your game besides the people that are that own and have the game installed, but think about the people who are going to be watching it. And as Twitch and YouTube and other and actually Facebook just launched their Facebook gaming app for streaming games. As these mediums just get bigger and bigger and bigger, being able to think of new and creative ways to wrap wrap the viewers into those experiences, I think is something that is going to be more and more prevalent in development. So I think it's a pretty interesting time, but I could definitely say that the opportunity in gaming to take advantage of this huge global audience, no matter what platform you're on, you always have to be looking at what new and creative ways you can for your game to be able to take advantage of that. And I think the company like GenVid offers cool technology to that, and I'm sure there are others that are good as well. So it's worth looking into if you're a game developer and want to take advantage of it.
All
Yeah,
right.
we love GenVid.
Great. So I think with that, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I guess for you guys, anything else regarding the design of In the Black that we haven't touched on that you'd like to bring up?
I think we pretty much touched on everything. I mean, if people want to come to our website, www.impellerstudios.com, we go into depth on a lot of the things that I touched on, like weapon systems and gun, the way the science is going to work and the way the narrative is going to work and things like that. They can answer, that'll have a lot of answers for them. But
come to our Discord. We're pretty active on Discord. Jack's on there every day, so he knows everybody on there. But Discord. It's just In the Black is the server name. So come on by. You can chat with us. We're as close as we've ever been to launching. We've committed to launching this year.
Okay.
So we're going to have a beta at some point, not too far in the distance, and then early access. So. So we're just about there.
All right. And for those of you watching this recorded, I'll include links for social media, sites, and such in the description down below. But I guess before I do like my little end of stream little spiel there, I guess to end the cast on, I guess first off, besides Discord, any social media like Twitter, Facebook, stuff like that you would like to promote?
Well, In the Black has a Twitter. Impeller Studios has a Twitter. So the studio is Impeller Studios. The game is In the Black. My Twitter is Edmendi, EDMENDI. So feel free to hit me up. And if you ever have a question for us, just shoot an email to support@impellerstudios.com. And we monitor that pretty closely. So, and like I said, Discord would be great to chat with you there if you're into space games.
All right. And I guess for my final question for both of you then, do you have anything you'd like to say to the fans watching to end the cast on?
Wow. Well, first, thank you for all the backers that have made this possible. We made a big decision when we finished kind of delivering what we promised in the Kickstarter, and that we would add to scope pretty significantly, which is what we're doing now before we release it to the public. And we just are really thankful that we have such a great audience of backers that have kind of believed in the project and supported it, and have basically let us do what we're doing and expand the scope of the game. We didn't ask for more money. We're doing all the additional scope is from our own internal resources. But we felt like it would be great for them and the overall experience to be able to add more to the game, so that there's a bigger audience at launch. So we're very thankful for their patience and their just loyalty and dedication to what we're doing.
And I'd like to say I'm thankful for our team, Noah, Brewster, Andy Simmons, Remco, Vandenberg, David Westman, Tobiah, all of our guys. And those guys they're the guys who are really making this work. And, we get to come up here and be in the bright lights and in the flashy webcasts and stuff like that. But it's those guys that are really delivering the goods. And, I'm thankful to them every day that I get to work with them.
Me too. Yeah. Great. We have a great team, very passionate team, and very inspiring, definitely.
All right, yep. And guys, again, it's been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you.
Thank
Like I
you.
was saying in chat, we said we'll just talk for an hour. We can get through this whole thing in 1 hour of talking, and there's still more we can certainly go over, especially with the game design and game dev aspects of this. So, like I said,
Thanks for the great questions. You're very easy to talk to, so thank you.
thank you. And
Yeah, thanks. It was fun. It didn't feel like 3 hours. I mean,
that's
it was
good.
a great time. It was really fun. Thank you very much. You are a really good interviewer, and we really appreciate all the guys in your chat. Especially Sharky with all these.
And I would like to thank you for describing me as a mechanic vampire. I think we'll have to use that from now on when we talk about how I play games. But like I said, if you guys are free in the future, it would be amazing to have you back on talking either more about In the Black or, again, just generally about game design, because we can turn like any topic into a podcast around here.
Well, like I said, if you look on the chat, there's a guy, Garage Collective. That's Cyril Gouchard. He's doing some great games, and he's another teacher at SCAD. I would suggest you bring him on board, because he is he's the best. He does games by himself,
Nice.
and he's great art director, great designer, and I think he'll also be a really good point of contact for you for the future.
All right. Well, it is my turn to give my little speech about social media. So you can follow me on Twitter at GWBicer. I have my website, game-wisdom.com. There is our Discord and Patreon link down below. Patreon supporters get early and ad-free access to all these talks, and our Discord is open to everybody. So if you like to talk about game design or video games, be sure to join there. And yep, I am always looking for new guests. If you are interested in talking about upcoming games, game design, or teaching it as well, definitely feel free to get in touch with me. There are links all around where you can DM and private message me, so feel free. And other than that, be sure to check out my design books. I'll be sending links to these two gentlemen as soon as the stream is over, them to check it out there. And I'll be back later tonight for our regular game streaming, and we, of course, will have more game design casts in the future here. So come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. But with that said, everyone, have a great night, stay safe, and we will talk to you again next time. Take care.
Thank you.